Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. No epic wars, no haunted castles, no mysterious queens with poisoned rings. Tonight you wake up as an ordinary man in Victorian England, and your adventure, it's simply living through the next 24 hours. Sounds easy, right? You won't believe how much can happen in just one day. You'll feel the cold on your cheeks, the starch in your collar, and the weight of a world built on manners, coal dust, and unspoken rules, and by the end you might never complain about your own alarm clock again. Alright, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. The moment your eyes crack open, your teeth nearly chatter. The room is stone cold. The hearth died hours ago. Your breath puffs in tiny clouds above your mouth. Outside there's the faint clatter of hooves on cobblestones and the hollow moan of wind pressing through the sash window's warped wood. You're not rich, not poor either. You're somewhere in between. A clerk, perhaps. A man of decent coat and worn shoes. You rent a room on the third floor of a creaky boarding house in London. The wallpaper peels where it meets the ceiling, and your chamber pot sits frozen like a silent threat under the bed. No snooze button, no bedside lamp. Just you, a sliver of grey morning light, and the faint smell of coal from the stove downstairs. You slide out from beneath a wool blanket and scratchy linen sheet. Every movement makes your joints crack in protest. The wooden floor is cold and uneven beneath your feet. You shuffle toward the washstand, where a basin of water sits frozen at the edges. Dipping your fingers into its stings, your own private punishment for not heating water the night before. You splash your face anyway. Hygiene, after all, is becoming more than just fashionable. It's a mark of decency. Soap costs money, but you still keep a bar wrapped in cloth so it doesn't go soft. No indoor plumbing. You pour leftover water from the pitcher, scrape your cheek with a blunt straight razor, and dab your chin with a frayed towel stiff from last week's laundering. Victorian men are expected to show up polished. Dishevelled means undisciplined. Undisciplined means suspicious. Next, the mirror. Crack down one side. You examine yourself as you part your hair neatly down the middle and tame it with pomade. Your moustache must be just right, not too thick or wild, or you'll look like a radical or, worse, a German. You step to the corner where your clothes hang. Trousers, waistcoat, collar, cravat, jacket. No elastic, no zippers, just buttons, braces and habit. You dress in layers not for style, but for insulation. That jacket with the ink stain on the sleeve, still good. You smooth it with your palm and try not to wince at how threadbare it's getting near the cuffs. A pair of boots waits near the door, still caked with dried mud from yesterday. You spit on a rag and rub until they pass muster. You wrap your pocket watch chain around the buttonhole and tuck the timepiece in its proper place. A man who doesn't know the hour in Victorian London may as well not exist. Downstairs, someone is already shoveling coal into the range. It's Mrs. Gillyflower, your landlady. She whistles hymns with alarming cheer for this early hour. You nod as you pass her in the hallway. Don't stop or she'll trap you in conversation about the dampness in the basement. You grab your hat. Bowler, not top. Top hats are for bankers and men with less mud in their daily commute. Yours is dented slightly in the back, from when you tripped on Fleet Street last week and nearly landed in a fish cart. As you step outside, the city breathes its filthy breath in your face. Smoke coils from chimneys like ink in water. The cobblestones are slick with last night's rain and this morning's manure. The skies are pale soup, somewhere between yellow and grey. Another day begins. The moment your boot hits the street, the world jolts awake around you. A chimney sweep boy darts past like a shadow, his face blackened, bare feet slapping on the cold stones. A milkman clinks bottles down the alley. Somewhere nearby, someone is already arguing over the price of onions. You tug your collar tighter and head down the lane, your breath visible in the morning murk. This early, the city feels like it belongs to ghosts and tradesmen. You pass a pair of night soil men wheeling their sloshing cart down the road, heads down, noses wrapped in cloth. You give them a wide berth. Even here, in a time where stench is part of life, some smells are too much before breakfast. The shops are still shuttered, but a baker has begun to open his doors. The scent of hot bread punches through the coal smoke. A hungry dog paces outside, tail down, hoping for a crumb. You consider buying a roll, just one, but your coin purse is thin this week. You had to buy starch for your shirt collar, and that alone cost $1.50. Your stomach grumbles, but pride keeps your back straight. You cross over a puddle with a leap, not because of water, but because of the thick green slime that's gathered at its edge. You land and straighten your jacket. A gentleman, even a modest one, never arrives with stained trousers. Now you pass a fellow tenant, Mr. Blythe, a travelling salesman of ribbons and hosiery. He tips his hat and offers a morning, the way men do. Brief, brisk, no follow-up. Conversation this early is suspect unless it's about the weather, which today is cold, damp, and bone-deep. You nod and walk on, watching his boots disappear into the fog. There's a small moment of stillness before the city truly stirs. The horses haven't begun their noisy clatter in earnest. The factories haven't released their shrill whistles. It's the brief breath between night and labour. Some call it peaceful. Others call it the hour when debts speak the loudest. Your thoughts drift. Perhaps today will be the day the supervisor notices your improvements to the ledger system. Or maybe that quiet widow on the second floor will finally speak more than 2 words. Then again, perhaps it'll be the same as always. Long, cold, and just manageable. At the corner, a newsboy stands on a wooden crate yelling headlines you can't quite hear over the echoing rattle of an approaching cart. He's got ink-stained fingers and a voice like sandpaper. You glance at the headlines. A mine collapse up north. A scandal involving a baronet and a chambermaid. A penny dreadful about vampires in Manchester. All printed with slightly crooked type on rough grey paper. You don't buy a copy. You already know enough horrors from the office. As the light strengthens, the streets begin to crowd. Omnibuses rumble by, each one a metal and wooden rattletrap of hooves and elbows. A man calls for cab fare and curses the mud. A governess marches 3 children along the sidewalk like ducks in a row, each one with red cheeks and perfectly tied scarves. You pull your gloves tighter, not for fashion, but to keep the ink off your fingers later. You'll be expected to transcribe documents all morning, again, and any smudge will be treated like a moral failing. As the clock chimes the half hour, you're not yet late, but just barely. The day has begun to devour you, 1 minute at a time. The city moves, and so must you. You reach the narrow courtyard behind the draper's shop, where your office sits wedged between a tobacco merchant and a stairwell that leads, mysteriously, nowhere. It's a building that creaks when no one touches it. The front door sticks until you shoulder it with just the right pressure, the same pressure you learned the hard way after tearing your coat seam last February. Inside, the morning gloom seeps through the frosted panes. No gaslight's been lit yet. You feel your way down the hall by memory, passing Mr. Wexley's umbrella stand, always wet, always tilted, and hang your hat on the hook that's second from the end, the one that doesn't fall off the wall. Your desk waits, third on the left. A small, ink-stained thing of groaning wood and etched initials, most not your own. You once tried carving your own name into a hidden panel underneath, but the blade slipped and you ended up slicing your thumb. Still, the scar feels like a badge. You sit and arrange your things just so. Pen, blotter, ledger, ruler. A man's tools are an extension of his soul, or at least that's what Mr. Hargrave says when he's pretending to be philosophical. Hargrave isn't in yet. Good. That gives you 10 minutes to check your collar for smudges and fold your cravat again, just in case. The mirror in the corner is cracked and spotted like an old apple, but it serves. You tug down your sleeves and breathe slowly. Victorian men don't fidget, they smooth. Around you, the office begins to murmur. Footsteps on stairs, coughs, the sharp sound of matches striking for gas lamps. The light flickers uncertainly before catching. The air smells faintly of sulphur and something more sour, ink, sweat, old wool. There's a distant clatter of teacups from the back room. You don't go near that kettle unless invited. Last time you did, and Mrs. Turnbull stared at you like you'd stolen her pension. Mr. Hargrave bursts in 10 minutes late, as always, shaking off his umbrella with too much flair. His moustache is overgrown, his top button is undone, yet somehow he still commands the room. He drops his gloves on his desk and calls out, "Let's have something useful from you lot today, shall we?" You lower your head and pretend to be busy. The last man who answered back spent the next week copying invoices for roofing slates. You begin your day's work, ledger checks, shipping records, coal deliveries. The numbers never end. You blot, you tally, you try not to spill ink like you did last Thursday. Your cuffs still haven't forgiven you. The paper is coarse, yellow-tinged and slightly damp. It curls at the corners as if resenting its own usefulness. Every hour or so, someone makes a quiet joke about the supervisor's breath or Mrs. Turnbull's ferret-like gaze. Laughter never lasts more than 5 seconds. Any longer, and it draws attention. This is a place of order, propriety, and the illusion of upward mobility. If you work hard enough, maybe they'll let you manage the inventory room by Christmas. Or maybe not. Above the fireplace, a faded motivational plaque reads, "Industry is the soul of progress." The frame is cracked. The soul of progress smells faintly of feet. Outside the window, the fog begins to lift just enough for light to seep through. You can make out silhouettes on the street, men in aprons, a woman in a dark cloak with a basket of eggs, 2 boys fighting with caps in hand. You watch for a moment, then turn back to your figures. You have 20 more receipts to log before lunch, and if you forget to stamp them, again, Mrs. Turnbull will let you know with her terrifying silence. You dip your pen. The day crawls on. The office doesn't hum. It clicks, taps, and coughs. Everyone has a rhythm, and yours is faster than most. Not out of ambition, really. More like a mild, constant anxiety that if you slow down, someone will notice. And in this place, being noticed is dangerous. A draft sneaks under the window pane and chills your ankles. You think briefly about going to warm your hands by the stove, but the new boy tried that yesterday and was told curtly, "This isn't a parlour." So instead, you blow into your fists and keep scratching numbers into the ledger, trying not to smudge the pages with moisture. At 10:30, the door creaks again, and in walks Mr. Ellery from upstairs, always overdressed, always with a cane that he doesn't need. He's from the accounts office and has a talent for appearing just as someone makes a mistake. You sit straighter. So does everyone. The room becomes a little too still, like rabbits pretending to be rocks. Ellery nods and murmurs something about quarterly tallies. You don't hear the rest. You're too busy pretending to not exist. He lingers for a moment, picks up a half-filled document, and inspects it like a jeweller might a cloudy gem. Then he smiles, the kind of smile that says I could have you fired by lunch, and strolls out. You exhale. Moments later the whispers resume. Mr. Hargrave rolls his eyes. If that man were any more polished, he'd slip on his own reflection, he mutters, and a wave of stifled amusement ripples across the room. You smile too, just a little, just enough. As the morning wears on, the office grows warmer, not because of the fire, but because the gas lamps have been lit. They buzz faintly, casting sickly yellow light that flattens every shadow and makes your temples throb. You learned weeks ago not to look directly at them. The lamps aren't kind to headaches or secrets. You flip through an older ledger to cross-reference a delivery, 3 tons of coal that never seem to arrive. In the margins, someone has doodled a small caricature of Mrs. Turnbull chasing a goose with a broom. You stifle a laugh, then carefully trace over the page so it doesn't get noticed. Humour is dangerous here, unless it's very, very subtle. At 11:30, a shriek echoes from the stairwell. It's Mrs. Greaves from the millinery upstairs. A mouse has dashed across her feet. You hear a teacup shatter and a broom slam. For one glorious minute, the entire office listens like schoolboys. Even Hargrave grins. You all pretend not to, of course, but everyone will remember that mouse for days. It's nearing noon. Your neck aches. You reach back to massage the knot just above your collar, and your fingers graze a patch of skin rubbed raw by your starched shirt. You think about loosening it. Just one button. But that would be unseemly. You settle for leaning back instead, letting the chair creak like a warning. Lunch approaches, and with it, the slight stir of men beginning to hope. Not about food, necessarily, but about standing up, about walking, about not looking at numbers for 20 whole minutes. You either clock and watch the second hand drag its way toward freedom. Then, finally, a low clatter as Mr. Hargrave stands and stretches. His back cracks like a pistol shot. 12, gentlemen. Let's not waste the Queen's son. A poor joke, but it means you may leave your desk. You stand slowly, bones stiff, mouth dry, legs half asleep, but your spine is straight. A Victorian man is nothing if not composed, even on the inside of a weekday. You put on your hat, you brush invisible lint from your jacket, and you walk toward the streets once more. The midday air hits different, not warmer, just louder. The city by noon is a beast fully awake. Steam hisses from pipes beneath iron grates. Boys in caps dart between carts. A costermonger yells about his turnips like they're treasure. The clatter of hooves and boots is relentless, like 1,000 watches ticking out of sync. You haven't much time, and not much coin either. Lunch is a delicate balance between appetite, thrift, and what your stomach can tolerate. You consider the pie stall tempting with its flaky crusts and thick scent of peppered meat, but you remember the last time. The filling was ambiguous. One bite crunched, and you're fairly certain meat shouldn't crunch. Instead, you follow instinct and habit to the corner near St. Dunstan's, where an older woman named Mrs. Creeley sells toast, tea, and something she calls penny pudding, from a tin stall with wheels that haven't turned in years. Her stall smells like boiled raisins and burnt sugar, comforting, if not entirely appetizing. You queue behind a man with coal-black fingernails and another in a bowler too small for his head. Everyone pretends not to notice each other. Men in Victorian London rarely speak at lunch unless forced. You keep your hands in your pockets and your thoughts guarded. When your turn comes, you order toast and tea. It's the safest choice. The bread is blackened on one side and still soft on the other, but it's warm, and the tea is strong enough to make your eyebrows twitch. There's a smear of treacle on the plate, more suggestion than serving. Still, it's enough. You find a patch of wall in a quiet alley and eat standing up. No one sits unless they've paid dearly for the privilege. You chew slowly, letting your jaw do the work your stomach will soon regret. The toast turns to paste, and the tea scalds its way down. But there's something grounding in the ritual. You've eaten worse. Around the corner, the richer men pass by. You see them clearly, Polished boots, silk cravats, waistcoats stitched in colours yours would never dare. They walk in pairs, talking about markets and estate matters and how dreadful the opera was last night. You pretend you don't hear them, but you always do. Once, a man in that crowd stopped and looked you over, said you reminded him of his valet. You nodded politely, but inside something soured. Not anger, just the slow, sinking certainty that no matter how clean your collar or careful your pen strokes, someone will always see you as background. Across the square, a blind accordionist plays a trembling tune, off-key but strangely soothing. A small dog sits at his feet, eyes half-lidded, tail gently thudding against the cobbles. You toss a half-penny into the cup, not out of charity, but for the dog. The city smells like ash, horses, fish and smoke, but here and there a wisp of perfume, a bakery's back door, or the sweet tang of an orange peel cuts through. You hold on to those moments. They're rare. You finish your toast, your teeth still crunch down on a burnt edge. You pocket the tin teaspoon, everyone does, and wipe your fingers on a handkerchief that's seen better centuries. Across the road, the bell of St Dunstan's tolls once, 12:40. Time slips fast when it isn't miserable. You take one last breath of open air, and then, with the same steady steps, you return to the books, ledgers, and gaslit corners that make up your weekday world. Back inside, the building greets you with the familiar scent of old paper, worn wood, and faint mildew. The fire in the grate has gone out again, and no one relights it. Afternoon chill creeps in under door frames and through your soles. You flex your fingers once, twice, before picking up the pen again. It's dry. You dip it and start over, carefully avoiding the crusted edge of the inkwell. Lunch never really satisfies. It's not supposed to. It's more a placeholder, a ritual to break up the grey of the day. The pie stall, the toast wagon, the slurped eel soup if you're brave. None of it fills you so much as it confirms your place. A man in motion, never quite rested, never quite arrived. Someone across the room sneezes wetly into a handkerchief, and then returns to their ledger as if nothing happened. No one flinches. Germ theory is in the newspapers, yes, but here in the office, illness is more superstition than science. You've seen men cough blood and finish the week before keeling over in their chairs. No one gets time off, not unless it's permanent. You glance at your fingers. Ink stains have made a home there. You rub, but they've seeped deep into the lines of your skin, a permanent signature of your station. Mr. Hargrave passes behind you without a word. His boots creak in a rhythm you've come to dread. 4 steps, pause, turn. He always stops by your desk. Today, he doesn't. That, somehow, feels worse. A small envelope arrives near 2 o'clock. Plain, yellowed, addressed in that overly formal, overly looped script your brother uses. You tuck it into your breast pocket. You won't read it until you're home. Not because of time, but because of privacy. Victorian men don't cry at their desks, not even for brothers still stuck in the ironworks at Sheffield. By mid-afternoon, your stomach is twisting again. Not hunger, stress. Your eyes blur from the numbers, the ink feathers too easily on this cheap paper, making every digit look like a smudge. You grip your pen harder. In the corner, someone clicks their tongue repeatedly, unconsciously, like a metronome of irritation. You don't say anything. Victorian office politics are brutal but silent. The louder you complain, the closer you come to replacement. You think about switching trades. You think about America. You think about taking a train to the seaside and never returning. But all those things cost money, and your shoes have a hole in the left sole that you patch weekly with paper. At 3, you stand to stretch and peer out the window again. The fog has returned, thicker than ever. You can't even see the opposite side of the street. Somewhere out there, carts clatter, children shriek and bells toll. But here, in your ledgers, time slows. And then there's a knock. A boy from downstairs, a messenger in a frayed blue jacket, hands you a scrap of folded paper, Hargrave's signature. You're needed in the back room. You go. The back room is colder, smaller, dimmer. There's one chair, one lamp, and a stack of new books waiting to be bound. You're told to begin inventory. It's a tedious job, but one you do well. So you sit, unwrap the first ledger and begin counting. The hours vanish like breath in winter. Your back aches, your eyes sting, but the pages turn, and eventually at the stroke of 5, Mr. Hargrave clears his throat from the hall. That'll do. That's all. No praise, no nod. But the day is done. You set down the pen and flex your fingers one last time. They're stiff, black-streaked and shaking slightly, but they've made it, and so have you. The moment you step outside again, the air has changed. It's heavier now, soaked with soot and the damp breath of hundreds of chimneys. The fog that crept in during the afternoon has thickened to a yellowish mist that blurs edges and dims gas lamps to a muted glow. You pull your coat tighter across your chest and begin the walk home, boots ticking softly over wet stone. The city at dusk is not restful. It's louder than the morning, more tangled. The streets fill with a new kind of rush, not of ambition, but escape. Everyone wants to get home, wherever home may be. You dodge carts overloaded with crates, hear the cracking whips of frustrated drivers. A dog yelps somewhere behind you, chased off by a boot or a broom. You don't look back. You pass 3 boys balancing on a pile of coal sacks, laughing as they shove each other. Their faces are striped with grime, their laughter high-pitched and startling against the low rumble of hooves. One of them whistles a melody you can't place, though it rings oddly like a hymn. It takes time to fall into the rhythm of the street. You dodge puddles with memory rather than sight. You know which alley smells too strongly of rotting fish, which corner the chimney soot always gathers. And yet, every day there's something new. Today it's a banana peel crushed into a cobblestone, a strange fruit still rare in these parts. Someone wealthy must have tossed it. A tram clatters by, pulled by 2 weary horses with steam curling from their flanks. The conductor yells at a man trying to board while it's moving. You glimpse inside, men with newspapers folded like weapons, women in gloves staring out the windows like queens on parade. You walk past. You're not far from the Thames now, and the air begins to carry its distinct scent. Stagnant, salty, faintly metallic. The fog mixes with it, and the whole street begins to feel like a dream. Gas lamps flicker in pairs, lighting your path unevenly. Some have cracked glass, some burn blue. You pass beneath them like a ghost between worlds. As you walk, you become aware of the noises layered beneath the obvious ones. A hackney driver swearing under his breath. A mother calling her child's name with more exhaustion than urgency. The persistent clank of a smithy's hammer in a side alley, still going even now. Your route home takes you along Fleet Street, where the newspaper offices glow from within, fiery little boxes of chaos. You can see silhouettes pacing, arguing, writing. Once you considered trying your luck as a reporter, but you lack the swagger and the bribes. You pause for a moment to let a funeral pass. 4 men in black carrying a plain box to a horse-drawn hearse. No flowers, no mourners, just the clop of hooves and the slap of leather reins. You remove your hat. Not because anyone's watching, just because it feels right. As you continue on, the city darkens. Lamplighters move ahead of you, poking their long poles toward the gas jets, bringing light with each touch. It's oddly magical. this Victorian ballet of fire and fog. One of them nods to you. You nod back. These are the little contracts men share without words. Your boots squish slightly with each step. That hole in the sole is growing. You'll patch it again tonight with scrap paper and wax. It's a ritual by now. Then, just as you reach the street where your boarding house stands, you pass an apothecary's window. There's a new tonic on display. For vigour and vitality in the modern gentleman. It's probably full of alcohol, opium, or both. You consider it for a moment, then keep walking. You've survived another commute. The city didn't devour you today. You reach your doorstep just as the wind picks up, carrying with it the bitter bite of river damp and coal ash. The street behind you melts into the evening murk, a tangle of silhouettes, gaslight halos, and the occasional glint of carriage lanterns. You pat your coat pockets, key, handkerchief, the folded letter from your brother, and then slip through the warped wooden door of the boarding house. Inside, it's dim and close. The faint smell of cabbage water lingers like a memory that won't leave. The hallway gas sconce sputters. You pass Mrs. Gillyflower's room, she's arguing with her canary again, and take the stairs slowly, one at a time, careful to step over the warped third tread. You know this staircase better than you know most people. At the top, your room greets you with its familiar silence. The floorboards groan as you step inside, shutting the door with a soft click that feels final. You hang your coat on the hook, pull off your boots, and inspect the wet spot in your left stocking. The hole's worse now. You make a mental note. Tomorrow, newspaper and wax again. You light the small lamp near the bed. It gives off a tired glow. Everything in the room feels tired, really. The chair with its fraying cane seat, the washstand with its chipped bowl, the cracked mirror that leans a bit more each month. Even the bed, squat and lumpy, seems to sag in defeat. You sit. Breathe. For a moment nothing happens, and that strangely is the most precious part of your day. But you can't linger long. There's still your appearance to fix before dinner, such as it is. You take off your cravat and inspect your collar. A faint ring of sweat stains the inside edge, but nothing scandalous. You run your fingers through your hair, straighten your shirt front and smooth your moustache back into form. Even now, presentation matters, especially in shared dining rooms where every glance is a social chess move. You hear a bell clang downstairs. Twice. Supper call. You stand with the kind of slow stretch that feels like luxury. Then you open the small drawer by your bedside and retrieve a tiny tin of boot polish. No time to shine them now, but it comforts you to know it's there, a small preparation for the next commute, the next morning, the next wet puddle you'll fail to avoid. As you step into the hallway, you pass young Mr. Olver, the apprentice printer, who nods at you without smiling. He's wearing the same jacket as yesterday, and the smell of ink clings to him like smoke. You return the nod. You don't speak. Men here rarely do in hallways. Words are saved for rooms with tables. You descend to the ground floor dining room, where 6 chairs encircle a scarred pine table. The light is weak, the silence weaker. Mr. Hargood, who repairs spectacles, is already seated, spoon halfway to his lips. The stew smells vaguely of mutton, more strongly of turnips. No one asks what else might be in it. You take your seat, offer a muttered "evening," and receive 3 grunts and a cough in reply. Mrs. Gillyflower shuffles in behind you and begins ladling portions. You get a shallow bowl, half a roll, and a chipped mug of tea strong enough to make you squint. No one complains. This is the hour of quiet chewing, the clink of spoons on porcelain, the soft rustle of a newspaper shared between bites. Here, status blurs. You all return from your own battles, equally weary, equally silent. When your bowl is empty, you push it aside and glance around. No one is speaking still. Not even Mrs. Gillyflower. It's the kind of peace only fatigue can enforce, and it suits you just fine. The dining room empties gradually, chairs scraping in uneven rhythms, boots shuffling across warped floorboards. You're among the last to leave, not out of slowness, but out of a quiet reluctance to face your room again. There's something deeply melancholic about the moment after dinner, when your stomach is just full enough to remind you how hungry you were, and your mind is too dulled to pretend anything exciting might happen next. Back upstairs, you toss your gloves onto the chair and loosen your shirt collar by one button. Finally. The release is slight, but it feels like victory. You roll your sleeves to the elbow and sit at your desk, if it can be called that. It's a crate turned sideways with an old ledger stretched over the top like a tablecloth no one ever bothered to clean. There's a stub of pencil, a torn envelope, and the letter from your brother, still unopened. You touch it gently, then tuck it beneath the desk. Not yet. Instead, you reach for your favourite pipe. Not the fancy one with the ivory stem. That one's for Sundays. But the sturdy cracked briar that's followed you since '77. You stuff it with shag tobacco and strike a match. The flame flares briefly, then steadies. The scent is earthy, warm, faintly bitter. It fills the room in seconds. Evening in the Victorian boarding house is a solitary affair disguised as shared lodging. Through the thin wall you hear someone coughing, a deep ragged sound that might belong to Mr. Olver the apprentice. 2 walls over, someone drops a chamber pot with a spectacular clatter, followed by a muffled "blast it." You smile. You lean back and let your eyes rest on the ceiling. The plaster's cracked in one corner, spreading slowly like a spider's web spun by time itself. You find yourself thinking about the office again. Not the work, but the faces. Hargrave's never-ending scowl. Mrs. Turnbull's tiny spectacles perched like judgment, and the gaslight that hums louder the longer you stare at it. There's a knock at your door, not loud, not urgent. You freeze for a second, pipe halfway to your mouth. "Evening," says a voice, female, soft. You recognise it. Mrs. Alder, the widow in room 6. She sometimes borrows matches or sugar, sometimes just talks. You open the door. She's holding a copy of the Illustrated London News from last week, folded neatly. "Finished it," she says. "Thought you might like the bit on the Great Eastern." You take it, nod, thank her. You both know it's an excuse for connection, and neither of you minds. You don't invite her in. She doesn't expect it. Not here. Not like that. Instead, you share a few words about the weather, the fog, the stew. Less awful than usual, and then she nods and vanishes back into the hallway. You sit back down, the paper now spread before you. The article is short, a few lines about shipbuilding, new cranes and some politician's speech. But it's enough. You read every word like it. Matters. Victorian men are not known for dreaming out loud, but as the pipe smoke curls toward the cracked ceiling, you imagine yourself far from this tiny room, aboard the Great Eastern perhaps, sailing into a wider world. Somewhere without ledgers, somewhere warm. You know you won't go, but you let yourself imagine it anyway. You fold the newspaper with the same care one might fold a farewell letter and place it on the desk beside your pipe. The tobacco has gone out, but you don't bother relighting it. The room is already thick with smoke, clinging to the curtains, your shirt, your very skin. A smell that will follow you into tomorrow like a ghost. You reach for the old leather notebook you keep tucked beneath the floorboard. You don't open it, not tonight. But your fingers linger on the worn spine. It's a habit, a superstition almost. Inside are pages filled with ideas, fragments, small wishes you can't say aloud. Shopkeeper plans, a diagram for a more efficient ledger system, half of a poem you never finished. There's even a crude sketch of a seaside town you've never seen. You slide the notebook back into hiding. No need for Mrs. Gillyflower or anyone else to find it and ask questions. Dreams, after all, are not a thing men like you are encouraged to display. Better to keep them buried, safe beneath splinters and dust. To distract yourself, you polish your boots again. You already did it yesterday, but it gives your hand something to do. The left boot still leaks. You cut a new square of newspaper to stuff into the toe, layering it between wax paper and wool. It's a small fix for a larger problem, but that's how most things work in your life. Patched, padded, postponed. From outside comes the low chime of the city clock striking 7. You picture it without looking, the old tower hunched between taller buildings, its brass bell tarnished but proud. That sound marks the end of possibility for the day. No shop will take you now, no letters posted, no errands run. The world is closing its shutters. You wash your face with a cloth dipped in cold water, then dry it on the towel hanging by the washstand. It still smells faintly of starch. You'd meant to visit the laundry on Sunday, but the rain had other ideas. The cloth stiffens when it dries. It always does. Victorian laundry has no mercy. You sit again, staring at the envelope from your brother. The wax seal is cracked from travel, the paper smudged. You think about Sheffield, how the air there is thicker, darker, always churning with smoke from ironworks and shouting men. You think of your brother's hands, stronger than yours, always bandaged. You wonder if they still bleed. You open the letter. The handwriting is tight, practical. He's well. The job pays, but not enough. A man fell into a vat last week. They didn't stop the line. He's thinking of joining the railway, or the army, whichever pays more. He asks if you're still at the same place, if you've managed to move to a front desk, if the landlady still sings hymns. He signs off with a scrawl and a joke. Still got both hands, for now. You fold the letter and place it in the drawer. There's nothing to reply with yet. You'll wait until something changes, or until next week. You glance again at your pipe, now fully cold. The coals in your little fireplace haven't been lit all winter. You can't afford the fuel, and the boarding house won't cover it. So you pull the blanket from the bed and drape it across your shoulders. Outside, the fog presses against the glass like a held breath. Inside, you lean back in your chair, stare at the ceiling, and let the stillness hold you. This too is what Victorian men do. The night deepens, and with it comes the peculiar silence of a building not quite asleep. You hear the occasional creak of a floorboard, someone shifting in bed or crossing the hall with a candle stub. Pipes groan. Wind whistles faintly through the cracks in the window frame. Victorian homes always speak after dark. You don't light your own candle. You know the room by heart. And besides, paraffin is expensive. Instead, you sit in the dim glow of the hallway lamp spilling faintly under your door. Just enough light to see your hands. Just enough to remember you're still here. You stretch your legs. Then stand and go about the quiet rituals of the evening, brushing lint from your jacket, laying out your trousers neatly for tomorrow, placing your watch on the nightstand so the tick doesn't echo inside your waistcoat all night. There's no such thing as switching off for a Victorian man. Even alone, even in the dark, you're thinking about wages, about tasks left unfinished, about what your posture says when you cross a room. There's a stiffness to manhood here, not in body but in spirit. You carry it with you everywhere. Still, you have your escapes. In the top drawer of your cabinet, behind a faded prayer card and a dented shaving tin, you keep a small deck of cards, well worn, dog-eared, stained by fingers and spills and time. You draw them out now, set them on the bedspread and begin to deal. Not a game, a ritual. You lay them one by one, face up, and tell yourself tiny stories. That the Queen of Hearts is the widow down the hall, who once taught Greek to boys before her husband drowned. That the Nine of Clubs is your old school teacher who could never look anyone in the eye. That the Ace of Spades is you, tired, silent, unreadable, It's silly, you'd never admit it, but you do it every night. A knock interrupts your thoughts, not at your door, further down. 2 knocks, soft, then a door opening and closing. No voices, just footsteps, slow, rhythmic. You listen closely, but no better than to eavesdrop too long. Boarding houses have their secrets, and you've learned that knowing too much is often worse than knowing nothing at all. You return to the cards. You lay out another row. Then you hear it, the low thump of laughter, male voices, suppressed, conspiratorial. Probably the 2 younger men from room 9. They fancy themselves philosophers after dark, smoking poor tobacco and discussing revolution in whispers. It's harmless talk, the kind that never reaches the street. You once tried joining their conversation, sat on the edge of a shared bed, offering a timid comment about the Reform Act. They nodded politely, then carried on without you. Your boots weren't shiny enough, your opinions too cautious. Or maybe it was just the way you said pardon instead of what. Victorian office culture follows you home. There's always someone measuring your worth, even when no one says a word. You sweep the cards back into their case and tuck them away. Then you turn to your shoes. Again. Yes, you polished them. Yes, they're drying. But still, you kneel and inspect the heels, run your fingers along the seams. There's comfort in the familiar texture of leather, the quiet scuff of fabric over wax. A Victorian man keeps his appearance, not for vanity, but for survival. There's no promotion for effort, no praise for keeping your collar clean, but you keep doing it, because someone might notice if you didn't. You sit back on the edge of the bed, hands resting on your thighs. The blanket beneath you smells faintly of soap and dust, a combination that somehow feels clean and stale at once. For a moment, you do nothing, just listen. To the ticking of your watch, to distant hooves clattering on wet cobblestones, to the scrape of a neighbour dragging a chair across the floor above. It all blends into a lullaby of the ordinary. You think about tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, not in dread, but in sheer mechanical acknowledgement. The days roll forward like a great iron wheel, and you're simply beneath it, pushing along. Still, your mind wanders, just for a moment, to what might have been. You imagine yourself in a different coat, one with brass buttons, or perhaps no coat at all, walking barefoot on a warm shoreline, someplace without ledges or lampsoot. You wonder what a man like you would have been in another century. A stonemason, a monk, a farmhand in a place with air that smells like green things, not ash. You chuckle quietly to yourself. A Victorian man mustn't romanticize too much. It leads to distraction. Distraction leads to error. And errors get logged, reported, and remembered. Especially in a world where reputation weighs more than currency. You glance at the letter again. Your brother's rough handwriting looks somehow more urgent in the fading light. You want to write him back, tell him you understand, that you too think about leaving, that your own days feel tight and narrow like collars pulled too high, but there's no way to put that into words without sounding soft. Victorian men don't confess softness, not even to blood. You lie back, boots still off, shirt still buttoned. You won't fully undress until the last moment. Part habit, part caution. You once read a story in the Strand about a man who had to flee a fire barefoot and shirtless. You vowed never to be caught like that. The ceiling glows faintly now, catching the flicker of gaslight from the street through the warped glass. You stare at it until it stops being ceiling and becomes something else. A map, perhaps, or a field of cracks stretching toward possibility. You turn your head and notice something odd. A quiet hum, low and steady. It's the new tenant's harmonium in the next room. He plays it at night, always the same 3 hymns, always slowly. He never sings, just lets the notes drift through the walls like incense. Some tenants complain, others find it comforting. You find it strange, but strangely welcome. You sit up again, just long enough to light your candle for the first time tonight. You only burn it for 10 minutes a day, just 10. Enough to read 1 page of the novel you've been eking out for months. Dombey and Son, picked up second-hand from a street stall, pages patched with flour paste. Tonight you read slowly, lips barely moving, letting each word settle. It's not just the story, it's the rhythm, the ritual, something to hold on to. After 10 minutes you pinch the flame. You lie down, fully now. Pull the blanket over your shoulders. You fold your hands across your stomach, as if in rehearsal for something you'd rather not name, and as your eyes adjust to the dark once more, the city outside continues its muffled symphony. Tomorrow will come, with its boots and ledgers and black tea. But tonight, for just a few hours, you are no one, and no one has anything to prove. The morning finds you exactly where it left you, in bed, in the cold, staring up at a cracked ceiling that greets you with quiet indifference. But this isn't the same morning. This is Saturday. And though the day begins the same, breath frosting in the air, floorboards numbing your feet, it carries a slightly different rhythm, slower, looser, like a shirt with the top button undone. You sit up and stretch, joints cracking like dry wood. The sunlight slants in at a different angle today, catching the dust motes dancing above your washstand. You wash just as cold, shave just as carefully, but you do it with less urgency. Even Hargrave doesn't expect punctuality on a Saturday, just your presence and a clean collar. Downstairs, the boarding house feels more alive. Mrs. Gillyflower hums a march instead of a hymn. Someone laughs, openly, for the first time all week. The postboy drops letters through the slot with a slap. A cat yowls from somewhere it shouldn't be. The city outside is waking up not for duty but for trade, for errands, for chaos of its own choosing. You decide to skip breakfast, not because you aren't hungry, but because the fog is thinning early and you have somewhere to be. By the time your boots hit the street, you've settled into the rhythm. The usual clatter and stink remain. Horse droppings, fish barrels, coal dust in the air. But there's a freshness too. Saturday is market day. That means noise, yes, but also colour. You pass stalls draped in every fabric imaginable, some cheap and loud, others muted and fine. The fruit sellers shout the names of their wares like battle cries. Pears, apples, oranges from Lisbon. It's the oranges that catch your attention. Still rare, still luxury. One rests in a stall basket like a jewel on display. You can't afford it, but you stand and admire it for a moment, pretending to inspect your pocket watch. You move on. You reach your destination after a 20-minute walk through shifting smells. Roasting chestnuts, spilled beer, wet wool. It's a modest building tucked between a pawnbroker and a greengrocer. Faded lettering on the window reads, P. Renville and Cohen, booksellers and circulating library. This is your indulgence. The bell above the door tinkles as you step inside. Warmth rushes out to meet you. Not just the heat from the iron stove in the corner, but the scent of paper, ink, and dust. Familiar, comforting. Mr. Renville looks up from behind his counter. He's a man with spectacles so round they seem to reflect the world back distorted. He nods once, the way all men of few words do, and returns to cataloguing pamphlets. You walk between the narrow shelves, brushing your fingers against spines that range from cracked leather to cloth-bound blue. Dickens, Wilkie Collins, Darwin hidden behind a curtain, A penny dreadful series you pretend not to enjoy, though you've read every one twice. You aren't here to buy. You've paid your subscription, 2 shillings a month, and that allows you 1 book at a time, exchanged weekly. You return the old curiosity shop, tucked under your arm, and in its place you select something new, something you haven't heard of, with a title that sounds just vague enough to promise mystery. Back at the counter, Renville stamps your card without looking up. This place is not meant for conversation, and that's what makes it perfect. You tuck the new book beneath your arm, wrapping it in a handkerchief so the fog doesn't warp the pages. Outside, the street has grown livelier. Vendors call louder. A brass band down the road wheezes out a crooked version of Rule Britannia. You step carefully past a girl skipping rope and a boy rolling a hoop with a stick. His shout nearly startles a horse. You cross the road to avoid a puddle that looks deeper than it should, and your boot still catches the edge. Now your sock is damp again. You sigh and keep walking. The kind of sigh you've perfected. The sort that releases no emotion, only steam. By now, the street's thick with people. Everyone out for something. Sausages, kerosene, ribbon, gossip. You spot Hargrave across the road, mid-haggle with a hatter. He doesn't see you. Good. You'd rather keep your Saturday intact. You wander further than usual, past a narrow alley you don't recognise. A man with no teeth offers you a boiled sweet. You decline with a nod, polite but brief. Victorian city etiquette, acknowledge but never engage. A conversation leads to a story. A story leads to a request. Requests lead to wallet loss or worse. But still, you turn down the alley, just for a moment. It opens into a small square you've never seen before. There's a man sketching horses with charcoal, a woman selling buttons in jars, a boy juggling pins. It's quiet here, not empty, but untroubled. The kind of place you wouldn't think London could hold. You sit on a dry bench, unwrap your book, and read the first page. The ink is still sharp. The story begins with a train, a missing valise, and a woman in disguise. You smile. You can tell already it's one you'll finish quickly. A voice interrupts you. Familiar, uncertain. Mr. Ainsley. You look up. It's the widow from room 6, Mrs. Alder. She holds a small cloth bag and wears a bonnet slightly askew. There's a surprised softness to her face, like she didn't expect to see you in daylight. You stand, nod. Didn't take you for a reader of penny fiction, you say. She smiles, small but real. Didn't take you for the sort who strolls this far east. You both sit, not quite close, but not apart either. She opens her bag and reveals a lemon bun. From the stall near the bridge. They bake fresh on Saturdays. You don't reach for it, but she breaks it in half and offers it anyway. You accept. The sugar sticks to your fingers. You eat quietly together, surrounded by buttons, horses, charcoal, and the strange stillness of a forgotten square. No one here knows your name. No one asks your wage. And for a flicker of time you forget about damp socks, ink stains, and the hard chair back in your room. When you both finish, she wipes her hands, tucks the paper into her bag and says, "See you at supper." Not as a question, you nod. "I'll save you the seat not next to Mr. Hargood." She laughs, out loud. A short, startled sound, quickly stifled, but it lingers like sunlight caught on glass. You stand, tip your hat, and return to the main street. You've spent no money, said few words, and yet something has changed. Saturday afternoons in London move like sludge. Slower than the rest of the week, yet heavier somehow. The market stalls begin to sag from the weight of unsold goods, and the morning's chorus of shouting gives way to hoarse voices and bored glances. Even the horses seem slower, their tails swishing lazily against flies rather than in defiance of reins. You don't head straight home. Instead, you take a longer route through the city's eastern lanes. where chimney stacks cluster like sentries and laundry lines flap between buildings like surrender flags. This part of town hums with a different rhythm, one of soot, heat, and the hiss of steam valves. You pass a brass foundry. Its massive doors are open, and the clanging from inside is deafening. Men in sweat-darkened shirts heave great moulds across the floor. Their faces glow red in the firelight. One of them, barely older than you, catches your gaze and nods. Just once. A silent communion between two very different kinds of tired. Not far from there, you pass a textile warehouse. The doors are closed, but the windows are open, and from them spills the sharp scent of dye and damp wool. You remember your uncle worked here before the accident. Slipped on a loose bolt, lost the use of his hand. They gave him a coin for trouble and a polite dismissal. You think of that whenever your own wrist cramps from holding a pen too long. Pain comes in all uniforms. Further on, the streets shift again, widening slightly, cleaner, lined with the kind of tidy shop fronts that feature window displays. Brass clocks, surgical instruments, scientific curiosities. You pause before one that sells barometers and telescopes. In the centre is a device labelled electrical vitalizer for nervous complaints and general malaise. It looks like something between a fishing reel and an instrument of punishment. The label boasts, as seen in the illustrated London news. You wonder what nervous complaints means, really. You've had plenty of those. Not the kind you say aloud, of course. Just the tightening in your chest some mornings. The breath that sticks halfway. The thoughts that arrive in waves when the city gets too quiet. But you've never been vitalised. You move on. The sound of a factory bell breaks through the air. Not the frantic clang of an emergency, but the steady pulse that divides time into chunks. Workers begin to spill out of buildings, their coats already in hand, faces drawn. You can always tell who's on the late shift. Their eyes don't quite meet yours. A boy runs past with a message satchel slapping against his side. Another follows, trying to hop a cart for a free ride. A constable yells from the corner, half-heartedly, more routine than reprimand. You pass a bakery where loaves sit in neat rows behind fogged glass. The smell is rich, heavy with caraway. You consider stepping inside, but you spent your last spare coin on lamp oil yesterday. So you keep walking, fingers curled, around the edge of your coat pocket, as if you might find something new in there by accident. By the time you round the corner toward home, the sky has begun its slow fade. Gas lamps sputter to life one by one. They hiss softly, like the city exhaling. You glance at your reflection in a shop window. Same hat, same coat. But something about your shoulders seems taller today. Maybe it's the walk. Maybe it's the bun. Maybe it's just the knowledge that this afternoon wasn't wasted on ledgers and smudged ink. Saturday is half over, but it's still yours. Back at the boarding house, the hallway feels stuffier than usual. Someone's been boiling cabbage again. The smell clings to the wallpaper, seeps into the floorboards. You climb the stairs two at a time, not out of energy, but out of habit. You've learned the exact creaks to avoid. It's a strange kind of intimacy, the one you share with this building. In your room, the light has faded to a pale amber. You don't bother lighting the candle just yet. You sit on the edge of the bed, peel off your boots, and stretch your toes against the cold wood floor. The patch of newspaper in your left boot held. Barely. You take the book from the library, The Vanished Gentleman, and lie back on the bed, one arm propped under your head, the other holding the pages open. The paper is rough and yellowed. You have to squint slightly to make out the type, but it's worth it. The story carries you away just far enough. A stolen identity, a train bound for Wales, a secret code inside a watch. You wonder what it would feel like to vanish. A knock again. This time you expect it. Mrs. Alder. She stands in the hallway, no bonnet this time, holding a small brown paper parcel. "Cooked apples," she says, a bit breathless. "They were softening, and I thought, well, it'd be a shame to let them go." You thank her, more warmly this time. Take the parcel in both hands. It's warm, heavy with cinnamon and some kind of syrup that's already leaking through the folds. She nods, doesn't linger. But before she turns away, she adds, "Thought I'd read for a while in the dining room, in case you felt like company." She doesn't wait for your answer. You place the parcel on the desk. Your stomach growls. The stew has long worn off, and your lunch was, as usual, more ritual than nourishment. You unwrap the paper carefully. Inside are 6 wedges of apple, stewed soft and dark, their skins curling like ribbons. The scent alone makes your mouth water. You eat them slowly without ceremony. Each bite is warm and clove sweet. Your shoulders ease, your jaw unclenches. You feel, just for these few minutes, like someone is looking after you. Then you wipe your hands, fold the paper into a neat square, and place it in the small tin by the window. You don't throw things like that away. It's not about thrift. It's about memory. The harmonium starts again in the next room. The same hymn as before. Slower. Tonight. Almost mournful. It winds through the wall like smoke, curling into your space without asking permission. You let it. You read 2 more chapters. The vanished gentleman is now hiding in plain sight, posing as a tutor for a blind heiress. You almost laugh at the absurdity, but you admire the author's nerve. There's power in pretending. Eventually you close the book and light your candle. The room fills with its soft flicker, every corner catching the gold of the flame. You glance at the door. The hallway's quiet now. You know the others have gone to bed. You consider joining Mrs. Alder in the dining room. Then again, you've had enough warmth for one night. You draw the blanket up to your chest and lie back once more, the novel tucked beside you. The smell of stewed apples lingers in the air. The harmonium fades. Outside, the fog presses against the window pane like a heavy curtain. And inside, you exhale. Tomorrow will come. With it, the return of office bells, ink blotters, and Hargrave's disapproving eyebrows. But tonight, you are full, and in your own quiet way, content. Sunday morning in London begins differently. Not quiet, no, but softer. The city seems to hold its breath a little longer. Fewer carts on the roads, fewer shouts in the alleyways. Even the chimneys smoke slower, as if the bricks themselves are tired. You wake to that stillness. The light through your window is muted, dappled by soot-streaked glass. You stretch beneath the blanket, but don't move just yet. There's no work to hurry for. No Hargrave, no ledgers, just a few long hours of unpaid time and the fragile freedom they offer. Eventually you sit up and wash your face in cold water. No shaving today. That's your rebellion. The rough edge of stubble makes you feel faintly dangerous, like a man no longer fully shackled to the weak. You smooth your hair but skip the pomade. You leave your collar unstarched. You pull on your oldest waistcoat, the one with the loose thread near the pocket that you've been meaning to snip for 6 months, and then you step into the hall. The boarding house is quieter than usual. You hear a low murmur from the dining room, someone reading aloud, probably Mr. Hargood with his eyes too close to the print. A kettle whistles somewhere far off. Pipes gurgle overhead. You move silently down the stairs and slip out the front door before anyone can ask where you're headed. Sunday is when men become walkers. You join them on the streets, not marching, not rushing, just drifting with hands behind backs and heads tilted toward the clouds. You pass gentlemen with watch chains glittering in the light, and labourers with boots already wet from puddles. You all walk the same way. Not toward anything in particular, but away from everything else. It's in this rhythm that Victorian men speak to one another, if they speak at all. Near the park you fall into step beside another man. You've seen him before, never caught his name. He wears a brown coat with a mended seam at the elbow and chews clove gum like it's something expensive. You both nod. The silence between you is not awkward, it's permission. You cross Westminster Bridge together, watching the river churn beneath you. He remarks, without turning his head, "Bit higher than last week." You say nothing. He continues, "Must have rained north." And that is the conversation, complete. At the edge of the park, he peels off toward a bench. You continue, boots ticking on stone, until the city begins to thin around you. Children toss bread to pigeons. A couple argues quietly about where to stand for the best light. A preacher on a box calls out warnings in a voice hoarse from overuse. You listen, not to the words, but the tone. He's not shouting for God. He's shouting to be heard. There's a difference. You keep walking until the buildings give way to grass. The sky, still fogged, tries to brighten. Somewhere nearby, a brass band practices off-key, each note chasing the last in a stumble. You don't mind. You find a bench. Sit. Pull your book from your coat and read another chapter. The vanished gentleman is now being followed by a detective who suspects too little and talks too much. You smile. It's a bad plot, but it's yours. After some time, a boy with scuffed shoes approaches, selling roasted chestnuts from a tin pail. You shake your head. He lingers. You give him your last halfpenny anyway. Not for the chestnuts, for the boy. You stay on the bench long enough for the fog to lift slightly, revealing the outline of the city around the park. London, even in its haze, has a shape. You can trace the curve of a steeple, the hunch of a warehouse roof, the smoke trailing from a chimney you know belongs to the butcher who always overcharges. It's a skyline of labour, not glory. From behind you, a conversation drifts near. Two men, one older, one younger, talking in tones too casual for business, too guarded for friendship. You listen, not out of interest, but because you can't help it. They're speaking in the language of Victorian men, indirect, coded, thick with subtext. "Your boy still work in the docks?" the elder asks. "For now," says the other. They've started asking about his age. A pause. Then, "Best keep him quiet then." You look straight ahead. Men here speak around things. They speak in weather, in labour, in family. They don't say "I'm worried" or "I'm afraid" or "he's too young and I'm too tired." They just adjust their caps and say less than they mean. It's something you've grown used to. You stand, book under your arm, and begin the slow walk back toward the boarding house. The streets are fuller now. Church bells toll from different directions, overlapping like a conversation you're not part of. Families pour out of narrow chapels in Sunday best. The children skip. The men look relieved to be finished with obligation. The women look tired. You pass a line of men standing outside a soup kitchen, some with hands in pockets, some staring ahead as if already inside. You know that line. You've stood near it before, not in it, yet. But you know how quickly a missed payment, an illness, a single cruel twist can put you there. The line is never far. As you reach your street, a familiar sound reaches your ears. The sharp snap of leather against wood. A constable chasing boys away from the grocer's cart. They scatter, laughing, not quite running. One of them throws a piece of turnip back toward the pavement. It lands with a wet thud. You smile. Just a little. Back in your room, you place the book on your desk and sit. The sun has finally broken through, casting a crooked shaft of light across the floor. You hold your hand in it. It feels warmer than the room deserves. You think about the man in the brown coat from this morning. The clove gum. The brief talk of rivers. That's how men check in on each other. sideways, quietly, without asking, "Are you well?" Because no one would know how to answer. You reach for your pencil and scrap of paper, not to write anything grand, just a list. What to mend, what to clean, what you'll need if your boots give out before the month ends. But your hand pauses. Instead, you draw the shape of the park bench, the outline of the boy with the chestnuts, a circle for the woman who smiled as you passed. None of it artistic, just markings to remind you it happened. You put down the pencil, and for the first time this week, you say something out loud, to no one, just one word. Enough. Not as in, I'm finished, but as in, today gave me enough. By evening, the city begins its slow turn inward. The bells fall silent. The market stalls vanish. Gas lamps flicker like tired eyes trying to stay open. You sit in the dining room, elbows resting lightly on the table, half listening to Mr. Hargood mumble about a cracked monocle and the unfairness of cobblers who don't deliver on Sundays. You nod in the right places, but your mind is elsewhere, on the warmth of the chestnuts, on the widow's apple parcel, on the simple, strange satisfaction of hearing your own voice say, "Enough." There's a new man in the boarding house. You spotted him when you came in. Broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, too neatly dressed for a place like this. He hasn't said a word to anyone, but he eats with slow, deliberate bites as though rationing each one. You recognise that discipline. It's the kind men carry back from war or prison, or something worse they don't talk about. You and he exchange a glance over a chipped teacup. Just a glance. But it's the kind that says, "I see you." No further conversation required. Later, you return to your room and light the candle with a match that nearly snaps. The flame sputters, then holds steady. You let it burn longer than usual tonight. You feel indulgent, not for the light, but for what it represents. Time, privacy, the permission to stay awake a little longer just because you feel like it. You unwrap your pipe and fill it. A slower tamp this time. You're not rushing now. The first puff rises in soft spirals, and you lean back in your chair, letting your spine crack just enough to feel like you're shedding the week. Tonight, you're not in the mood for the book. Tonight calls for something different. You pull the old tin from beneath your bed, the one with the letters, the folded clippings, the keepsakes too odd or worthless for anyone else to value, a dried flower, a railway ticket stub to Brighton that you never used, a list of words you once overheard and liked too much to forget. Gloaming, flicker, parlour, hollow. You take out one of the clippings, a notice from a month-old newspaper. Public houses to close at midnight. New regulation passed in Parliament. You'd underlined it. Not because you drink often, but because it felt like the city itself was shrinking by the hour. You remember the last time you went to a pub, not the type with velvet benches and menus, the other kind. A small, dark room with a low ceiling and a landlord who only cleaned the glasses when someone important showed up. You sat in the corner with two other men, one of whom claimed he could forge a railway pass for 2 shillings and a handshake. You didn't take him up on it, but you remember his laugh, thick, wheezy, and oddly hopeful. That laugh is one of those things you store. Like a coin, you don't spend it, you just carry it with you. Now and then, men here gather in places like that to breathe a little wider, not to confess, not to cry, but to forget the exact shape of their lives for a few hours. Sometimes there's a piano, sometimes just a quiet nod across the room that says, "You're not alone in this." You put the clipping away, not because it's unimportant, but because your fingers are growing cold and the candle is beginning to pool into its base. You hold your hands near the flame, you watch them flicker, and for the first time this week you wish, not for more, but for someone to share this silence with. You don't leave the room again that night. The city outside feels too large, too wet, too filled with people pretending to be fine. You've done enough pretending today. So you stay. You sit with your pipe, your candle, and the soft ache in your spine that always arrives by Sunday night. You flip through a few pages of the novel, but your eyes skim rather than read. The vanished gentleman has become too clever, too unreal. You close the book gently, as though it might shatter, and set it aside. Instead, you reach for your small writing slate. It's just a scrap, really, framed in wood, rubbed nearly smooth, but it carries weight. You pick up the stub of chalk from the drawer and begin writing words. Not thoughts, not journal entries, just words. Stillness, hollow, clatter, mothlight, bone. You erase them, write others. Damp, step, worn, wait. You don't know why you do it. Maybe to catalogue what the day felt like. Maybe to control the chaos with syllables. Maybe because it's one of the few things in your world that no one else can touch. The candle guttering reminds you. Time is always escaping. So you pull out the house ledger, the little red book tucked near the washstand where you log your rent payments. You flip to the current week. Rent is due tomorrow. You run your finger along the page. 7 shillings. You have 6 in your coat pocket. You'll need to speak to Mrs. Gilliflower. Again. Your stomach knots. Not from fear, just the weariness of needing to explain, to make yourself smaller, to apologise for existing just slightly beyond what you can afford. Victorian men are expected to be orderly, punctual, solvent. Every shortcoming is a crack in the mask, and once it cracks, you don't get to put it back on. You close the ledger, tight. A thump echoes from down the hall, probably the tenant in room 9 dropping his boots again. He always does that on Sunday nights. You once timed it, 9:13 p.m. every week without fail. A man's life becomes so routine that even his weariness has a schedule. You lie back in bed, staring at the ceiling, the candlelight dancing faintly across the plaster's curves and cracks. You think about the pubs you didn't go to, the letters you didn't write, the voice you heard this morning saying enough. You wonder if that voice will come back tomorrow, or if it was a trick of rest. A moment of softness you can't afford to expect twice. You reach for your blanket and draw it up. The pipe has gone cold again. The window glass is sweating slightly with the condensation of your breath. You trace a line on it with your finger, an idle habit from childhood, one you never fully unlearned. And then you lie still. For a while you think you'll stay awake. Let your thoughts play their usual late-night games. What if I left? What if I said what I felt? What if someone actually noticed? But you're more tired than that. Deeper. It's not the kind of tired that invites fantasy. It simply pulls. You let it. Because tomorrow the office will open again. The ink will flow. The boots will click across the hallway floor, and your name, though rarely spoken aloud, will still need to appear in the ledger, neatly, properly, in black ink. And that, in the end, is what men like you do. Monday arrives without ceremony. No rooster crows, no bells ring, just the creak of the bed frame as you sit up, the dull ache in your knees from yesterday's walk, and the biting chill that has returned with cruel punctuality. You rub your hands together before daring to touch the basin. The water, of course, is still cold. Of course, the towel is still stiff. Of course, nothing has changed. But Monday isn't for change. It's for returning, to habit, to labour, to the quiet performance of duty. You dress without thinking. Your second best collar is clean enough. You retie your cravat 3 times until it lies flat. You brush your coat but skip the waistcoat with the missing button. Today requires as few questions as possible. Downstairs, Mrs. Gilliflower is waiting. She doesn't need to speak. She hands you tea with too much milk and no sugar. Then she gives you that look, the one that asks if your rent will be on time without asking it. You hold up 6 fingers. She nods, already turning away. No shame. Not here. Not anymore. Outside, the streets have already filled. London is a city that wakes angry. Boots clatter harder. Drivers shout quicker. The fog is thicker today, curling low over the cobbles like a warning. You pull your coat tight and join the flow, one more shape in the blur of men heading to places that do not love them. When you reach the office, the routine swallows you whole. Hat off, gloves folded, ledger open, pen dipped. It's almost soothing, the repetition, the predictable drudgery. There's comfort in knowing where your hands go, how much ink to blot, how many seconds to wait before turning the page. Mr. Hargrave enters late again, grumbling about the gas bill. Mrs. Turnbull shuffles past with a stack of papers and a disapproving sniff. Someone sneezes, someone mutters. The room settles into its familiar rhythm. Scratch, stamp, sigh, repeat. At 11, the supervisor makes his rounds. Not Hargrave, the real one. Mr. Latchbury, a man who smells faintly of lavender and starch and whose presence makes even the gas lamps dim a little. He speaks softly but carries a voice that demands silence. He stops behind your desk. You freeze, just for a moment. Then you straighten the blotter, smooth your sleeve, and continue writing. He doesn't speak, just observes. You feel his eyes like a weight on your shoulders. When he finally walks away, you exhale, not in relief, but in confirmation. You weren't noticed. That's good. Being noticed by Latchbury never ends well. Later, during the break, you and the others gather in the stairwell. No one smokes, yet everyone acts as if they are. Hands in pockets, shoulders hunched, eyes cast downward or sideways. This is where men speak in riddles. I hear the new ledger clerks from Leeds, someone says. Leeds? Another answers. That explains the ink stains. You all nod as if this makes perfect sense. It doesn't. But it fills the silence. In Victorian workplaces, silence must always be filled. Just not too loudly. A delivery boy comes in with a stack of parcels. He's 12 maybe, with scabs on both knees and ink on his fingertips. He grins like he knows something you don't. You envy him, not for his youth, but for the fact that he hasn't yet been folded into the system. He still walks like he owns his legs. You return to your desk. The same stack of forms waits, the same faint smell of mould and paper, the same ink bottle, half full, crusting around the edges. You dip the pen, you begin again. Because that's what this place is. A loop in waistcoats and wool and numbers that never quite add up, and you're part of it, entirely, invisibly. At 12:30, you're called to the back room. It's unexpected. Not alarming, not yet, but enough to make your pulse flicker. You brush your sleeves, straighten your collar, and make the walk down the hallway that suddenly feels longer than usual. Each gas lamp buzzes as you pass beneath it, casting your shadow up the wall like a figure in a penny theatre. Inside, Mr. Hargrave stands by the tall file cabinet with his arms folded and his mouth pulled tight. "You've been meticulous," he says, not looking at you. You nod, unsure if it's a compliment or a preamble to disappointment. He flips open a ledger and taps a page. There was a discrepancy last week. Coal figures, 1 ton short on the Briley order. Could have been missed, but you caught it. You wait. Then, "Good work." 2 words, that's all. No raise, no promotion, just acknowledgement. But in this office, acknowledgement is rare, almost dangerous. You feel taller as you return to your desk. Not prouder, just steadier. For a moment, you exist a little more solidly in the room. After lunch, the air shifts. The office gets quieter, heavier. The gaslight flickers in and out of rhythm. The men grow slower in their tasks. Pens scratch more sluggishly. Even Mr. Hargrave slumps in his chair like a cracked statue. This is the part of the day when time betrays you. You check the clock twice. It hasn't moved. A messenger enters with a payment ledger from the copperworks. It's thicker than usual, and when you lift it, a small envelope slips out. Unmarked. Curious. You shouldn't open it. But curiosity is stronger than propriety on a Monday afternoon. Inside, 2 theatre stubs, dated last Friday, balcony seats, the Beggar's Opera. Folded between them is a note. She didn't show, thought you might like them. There's no signature. You glance around. No one saw. You slip the stubs into your inner pocket, not for the show, but because someone thought of you. In this building, that's rarer than gold. You spend the rest of the afternoon in quiet thought. Not distracted. Your figures still add up, but drifting. You think of Mrs. Alder, of the park bench, of the lemon bun. You think of your brother in Sheffield, who probably doesn't get theatre stubs or quiet thanks. You think of the man you passed on the bridge yesterday, staring into the water like he was waiting for an answer. You wonder what holds you together. Not money, not ambition, not even duty. No, it's smaller than that. It's the quiet nod from Hargrave, the note without a name, the boy with chestnuts, the woman with apples, the sentence in a book that makes you forget what year it is, the things that don't fit in a ledger but still count. At 5 o'clock the bell rings. Men stand slowly, crack their backs, gather their coats. You close your ledger with care, as if tucking something alive to bed. In the coat room someone says, "See you tomorrow." You don't recognise the voice, but it warms you nonetheless. You step outside. The city hasn't changed. Still fog, still smoke, still the faint smell of manure and damp. But for the first time this week, you don't walk with your head down. You walk like a man who was seen. The air outside is colder than you expected. Not sharp, not biting, just persistent. It seeps through the seams of your coat and settles in your knuckles. The sun is already giving up for the day, folding itself behind the rooftops with the same weary rhythm as the rest of London. You don't head straight home, instead you walk. No destination, no errand, just motion. You let the streets decide where you go. Past gas lamps flickering like winks, past shop fronts closing their shutters one by one. A butcher hoses blood from the cobbles. A seamstress draws her curtain against the dark. You pass a group of dock workers laughing too loudly outside a tavern. The kind of laugh that covers tired bones and unpaid debts. They lean against the doorframe, passing a bottle in plain sight, daring the constable across the street to care. He doesn't. You keep walking. On a corner, a man is selling roasted chestnuts from a cart that leans slightly to one side. The heat from the brazier rolls out like a blessing. You pause, check your pocket. 1 spare halfpenny rattles inside. Enough. You buy 6, wrapped in paper that smells faintly of onions. The warmth bleeds through to your hands and you hold it close, not eating yet, just enjoying the sensation of something that isn't cold. You sit on a low wall near the square, beneath a flickering street lamp. All around, the city hums, not loudly, but deeply. A constant low rhythm of hoofbeats, mutters, chimneys, whistles. You can feel it in your chest like a second heartbeat. You peel the chestnuts, one by one. Let the shells fall at your feet. Each bite is sweet, smoky, soft, like something remembered rather than tasted. From here you can see the silhouettes of people in the lit windows above. A woman brushing out her hair. A man in shirt sleeves wiping his spectacles. A child bouncing in place on a worn mattress. You watch them without guilt. This city is made of watchers and the watched. Everyone pretends they aren't both. A newsboy darts past, calling out headlines from the evening edition. Strike threat at the shipyards. Woman found living in a chimney. Electric lamp tested in Suffolk. Gaslight soon replaced. That last one catches your ear. Electric lamp. You try to picture it. A city without flickering, hissing gas. Without the lamplighters with their poles. Without the yellow glow that makes every face look a little older, a little sadder. You can't imagine it. The chestnuts are gone. You brush your hands, tuck the paper into your coat pocket for later disposal and rise. The sky has deepened to the colour of soot. A few stars peek through, barely visible beyond the smoke. You don't expect them to stay long. As you cross the street, a carriage splashes through a puddle and soaks your ankle. You jump back, swearing under your breath, more out of routine than rage. The driver doesn't stop. Of course he doesn't. You make your way toward the quieter streets where the boarding houses lean, in close, whispering secrets in the dark. As you near your own doorway, you see it. A scrap of red caught in the knocker. You pluck it free. It's the corner of an envelope. No name, just a single line, written in ink that's begun to run from the damp. You left the theatre stubs, thought you might still want them. No signature, just that. You open the door and step inside, and for once, the hallway doesn't feel quite so narrow. Inside, the boarding house breathes its usual musty sigh. Boiled fabric, old wood, and the faintest whiff of something scorched. Likely Mrs. Gillyflower's attempt at pie crust. You stand in the hall for a moment, the red envelope still in hand, boots dripping on the mat. The gaslight above buzzes softly, a quiet halo in the gloom. You slip the note into your coat pocket and climb the stairs slowly, the wood groaning with each step. As you pass the second landing, you hear the usual evening symphony. Mr. Hargood snoring already, someone clanking their wash basin, the widow in 6 humming under her breath. Something familiar, vaguely melancholy. Back in your room, you hang your coat and light the lamp. The glow warms the cracked walls, makes your shadow dance over the dresser like a silent mime. You take off your boots and lay your damp socks on the windowsill, hoping the cold glass might do them some good. You've given up hoping they'll dry. You retrieve the theatre stubs from your desk drawer. They're still there, still dry, still slightly bent at the corners. You match them to the note. Same hand. The slanted loop of the T in theatre, the odd dip in the Y of you. Someone familiar, someone observant. You sit at the edge of your bed and stare at the paper as if it might confess more than it does. Whoever sent it, they noticed. You left something behind, and they returned it. Not for any reward, just to be kind. Or maybe just to remind you that you were seen. That's a currency you rarely spend, being remembered. You tuck the note into the book you borrowed, between chapter 7 and 8, just before the vanished gentleman trades names with a banker in Dover. A hidden place, but not too hidden. You'll want to find it again. Dinner is over, the house is settling, the clink of spoons has stopped. Pipes groan in retreat. You have a choice now, to read, to write, to sleep. You choose the middle path. From beneath your bed you retrieve the tin box again. Open it. Add the note to the others. The flower, the buttons, the page from the map. You hold the tin in your lap for a moment before closing it, sealing it not just against dust but against the daily forgetting that life insists upon. You return it to its place. Your hands are cold again. You rub them, then reach for your shirt cuffs. A thread has come loose. You pluck it, then regret it. Now the seam gapes slightly, but there's nothing to be done tonight. You'll sew it tomorrow, or the next day, or you'll just wear the waistcoat over it and pretend it's fine. That's the way of things. You undress slowly, folding each piece with care, not because they're fine, but because they're yours. Each item a shield, a statement, a quiet prayer to remain respectable, even if no one notices. You slip under the covers, stiff sheets warming by degrees. You lie on your side, listening. Through the wall, the harmonium starts again. A hymn, faint and sweet. You don't recognise the tune tonight. You don't need to. Because in that music, in the note, in the small act of returning a forgotten thing, there's something you rarely feel in this life built of smoke and paper. Continuity. You close your eyes, not just to rest, but to keep it. Tuesday wakes you with a cough, not your own, but someone's down the hall. Harsh and wet, the kind that rattles in the ribs. You lie still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening. One cough, then two, then quiet. You wonder if anyone will check on them. You know the answer. You rise slowly, every muscle reminding you of yesterday's walk, yesterday's desk, yesterday's stairs. The water in the basin is even colder this morning. Your breath hovers above it as you splash your face, blinking against the sting. You dry with the same towel. It hasn't dried properly since Sunday. Your shirt is clean but beginning to fray at the collar. You button it anyway. There's nothing else. The trousers have been brushed. The boots patched with paper again. The coat holds its shape if you don't look too closely. And so, dressed in Dignita's last thread, you descend the stairs. In the dining room, the mood is thinner than the porridge. Mr. Hargood is already eating, silently tearing his roll into tiny pieces. Mrs. Gillyflower ladles with the weary determination of a woman who's been stirring since dawn. You sit, nod, and receive your portion. It's warm, bland, and enough. Mrs. Alder is absent. You notice. No one else mentions it. No one ever does. In this house, absence is treated like bad weather. You acknowledge it silently, then keep moving. As you eat, you scan the other faces. Some you know by name, most you know only by habit. There's the man who always chews with his mouth closed and wipes his spoon before using it. The one who reads the paper upside down for a full 5 minutes before realising. The one who always leaves 2 bites uneaten. And then there's the new tenant. He sits with his back to the wall, eyes scanning the room like he's still on patrol. His coat is thick, dark, military, but unmarked. No rank, no regiment. Just the way he folds his hands betrays discipline. He drinks his tea without flinching. It's too hot, you know. You've burned your tongue 3 days in a row. You wonder what brought him here. Disgrace? Loss? Or just the same slow descent that brings every man to a boarding house eventually? You consider speaking to him, then you don't. You finish your breakfast, rinse your cup, and step out into the morning. The fog is heavier today, a dense yellowish smear over the rooftops. You can barely see the chimneys 2 buildings down. It smells of burnt oil, damp wool and soot, the kind of air that coats your throat and stays there. As you walk, the streets feel narrower than usual, the shadows thicker. A woman passes with a basket of fish, the smell trailing behind her like a coat. A boy pushes a cart with tin pots rattling like bones. A blind man plays a concertina on the corner, his dog asleep in a crate beside him. You stop, listen. The tune is shaky, uncertain. Not sad, but searching. You drop a penny in the tin. You're not sure why. You've skipped lunch for less. But today, the tune gets to you. Maybe it's the note from last night. Maybe it's the missing widow. Maybe it's just the fog. You keep walking. The office is quieter than usual when you arrive. Not in sound, but in feeling. The kind of hush that clings just under the surface. The gas lamps flicker more than they should. A window rattles in its frame, wind slipping in where the putties come loose. You hang your hat, nod to Hargrave, who doesn't look up, and settle into your seat. The ledger's already waiting. Open to the page you left yesterday, as though it too remembered where you stopped. You begin. Columns, numbers, dashes, the curl of ink, the drag of pen. It's mechanical by now, but not mindless. There's a rhythm, a control. A Victorian man is expected to master tedium to turn repetition into respectability. Mid-morning, a whisper starts near the back of the room. Not words, just a shift in tone, in breathing. You glance up. Latchbury has arrived. He doesn't walk so much as glide. Crisp suit, gloves in one hand, ledger in the other. You resist the urge to straighten your cuffs again. He isn't looking at you. Not yet. He stops at Hargrave's desk. Low voices. A paper passed. Then a glance toward you. You lower your eyes. Minutes later, Hargrave approaches. His voice is low, almost casual. Room 11, upstairs. Bit of a clerical snarl. They'd like you to sort it. He doesn't wait for an answer. He knows you'll go. You rise, dust your sleeves, and climb the stairs to the upper offices. You rarely come up here. The air smells less of ink, more of carpet and pipe smoke. There's a rug, a coat rack, and a door with the number 11 etched into the glass. Inside, a man you don't know greets you with a nod. Ledgers from the Lancashire line. Bit of confusion on coal weights. He gestures to a stack half as tall as your desk. You sit. Begin again. The numbers aren't confusing, just messy, misaligned, clearly entered in haste or by someone distracted. As you work, you notice small notations in the margins. Tiny dots, slashes, shorthand initials. You've seen this style before. A woman's hand, neat, fast, exacting. You pause. A memory surfaces. Years ago, a girl named Florence sat 2 desks over at your first job. She was fast. Too fast, the manager said. People noticed. He didn't like that. One day, she was gone. No explanation. Just gone. The marks in this book look like hers. Couldn't be. Could it? You shake the thought. Focus. Tally the columns. Circle the errors. Draw a line through the duplication. At the bottom of one page you find a note. Adjust for discrepancy if overseer forgets to carry line 3 again. Written small, sharp. It's a safety net for a mistake someone else makes regularly. You smile, just a little. Someone in this building still cares about getting it right, even quietly. When you return to the main floor, Hargrave glances up. Well? All sorted, you say. He doesn't thank you, of course not. But someone will see the ledgers, see that they make sense again, see the invisible hand that fixed the mess. Maybe. You sit back at your desk. For the rest of the day, you work steadily. The numbers line up. The ink dries clean. The quiet remains thick, but not heavy. At 5 o'clock, you close your book and pack your things. Before you leave, you glance toward Hargrave. He meets your eyes, just briefly, and gives the smallest of nods, barely more than a blink. But it's something. You step outside into the fog. Tonight you walk home slowly, boots clicking steadily on the stone with the sense, however slight, that something in the world is working the way it should, and that somehow you helped. You arrive home just as the fog thickens into something wetter, almost rain, but not quite. It drapes over your coat like a second layer and finds its way through your collar despite your best efforts. The boarding house door sticks a little as you push it open. Inside, the hallway's warm but not welcoming. The gaslight flickers overhead like it resents the job. You hang your coat and hat, flex your fingers and pause. The dining room is silent. Too early for supper, too late for tea. Just the in-between hour when the house feels like it's holding its breath. Upstairs you pass Mrs. Alder's door, still closed, still no sound. You hesitate, consider knocking, but you don't. Victorian politeness can be cruel in its restraint. You're not family. You're not entitled. So you walk on. Back in your room, the air is thick. The window's fogged from the inside. You wipe a circle with your sleeve and peer out. The street below is nearly empty. A milk cart rattles past. A lamplighter moves with practiced grace, igniting the posts one by one. His pole sways, hooks, lifts, flame blooms. It's a dance, one you've watched 100 times, but tonight it feels like ritual. You light your own lamp, pull the curtain, and begin preparing your one warm meal of the day. There's not much to work with. A small portion of lentils, half an onion, and the heel of a loaf that's gone more crust than bread. Still, you soak it in broth, slice the onion thin, and set the pot over the small stove that groans when lit. The smell is better than the taste will be. But that's half the battle, smelling like comfort. As it simmers, you remove your boots. Your socks are damp again. The left heel has torn open. You lay them over the back of your chair, close enough to the stove to dry but not burn. You think about mending them, then think better of it. You've got 2 more pairs, one almost whole. You eat slowly, spoon by spoon, staring at the flame under the pot even after the bowl is empty. The warmth settles in your belly, not quite satisfying, but anchoring. It reminds you, you're still here, still upright, still feeding yourself with what little you have. After washing the bowl in the basin, you sit by the window and open your notebook. Not the ledger, not the tin of scraps, just the small journal where you sometimes write things you'd never say aloud. You don't write sentences tonight, you write a list. Things I did today that mattered. 1. Fix someone else's ledger. 2. Didn't speak when silence was kinder. 3. Gave my last penny to a boy with a song. 4. Noticed the gas lamps turning on. You stop there. That feels like enough. You close the book, tuck it beneath your pillow, and lean back. The chair creaks softly. Through the wall you hear someone clear their throat. A door closes, pipes groan like a sleeping animal. The house settles into itself. And then, faintly, footsteps in the hallway. Pausing outside your door, you don't move. The knock never comes. The footsteps continue, then fade. You stand just long enough to slide the bolt on your door, not out of fear, out of ritual, because that's what Victorian men do. They secure what little they can. You don't go to bed right away. Instead, you linger near the stove, staring at the small flame through its iron grate. The glow pulses gently, casting your shadow across the warped floorboards in long, wavering strokes. You stretch your fingers toward it and imagine, for a brief stolen moment, that this warmth might last through the night. Victorian houses don't hold heat. They hoard it, stingily, in corners and under blankets. You've learned how to trap it with strategic layers. A blanket under the sheet, socks on the radiator when it works, newspaper beneath the mattress, an extra scarf under the pillow to keep your neck from stiffening by dawn. Tricks, all of them. Quiet tricks passed between men like secrets. You let the fire die naturally and return to the window. The fog is lifting ever so slightly, revealing a city that is never quite still. Across the street, a light flickers in the window of a watchmaker's shop. A silhouette moves behind the curtains. Tall, lean, precise. You imagine him winding clocks alone, each tick a small defiance against disorder. You know the feeling. A creak in the hallway interrupts your thoughts. Your hand moves instinctively toward the latch, but you stop short. The footsteps are slow, measured, not cautious, just tired. A door opens and closes 2 rooms down. You exhale. The building speaks in sounds, and by now you've learned the language. You open your book, not the journal, but the novel. Just a few pages before sleep. The vanished gentleman is in peril now, discovered by his enemies, cornered in a station house somewhere in Wales. But instead of fleeing, he turns and faces them, boldly, foolishly. You admire him for it. He chooses revelation over disguise. A luxury, really. You mark the page with a ticket stub, the one from the theatre, now frayed at the edge, and close the book. You stand and begin the quiet routine of closing your room to the night. You blow out the lamp, draw the curtain, fold your coat across the chair just so. You check the bolt again, though you know it's set. The bed is cold, of course, but you warm it quickly with body and breath. You pull the covers tight under your chin and tuck one hand beneath the pillow. As your eyes adjust to the dark, you notice the soft glow of the street lamp outside filtering through the cracks in the curtain. It paints faint golden lines across the floor, almost like bars. You blink once. They disappear. You close your eyes, but your mind does not quiet right away. You think of the woman who didn't knock, the footsteps that paused then passed, the returned note, the line of ink that simply said, "Thought you might still want them." You wonder if she'll speak to you tomorrow, or the day after, or never. You wonder if it matters. Then you remember the list in your journal, things I did today that mattered. You add one more in your head. 5. Waited for a knock without bitterness. It's not dramatic, not heroic, but it feels like something. Your breath begins to slow. The room settles. The walls stop groaning. The city outside breathes through the bricks like an old man in sleep, laboured but steady. And at last, so do you. Wednesday begins with a sound you don't expect. Laughter. Muted, brief, muffled by walls, but unmistakable. You sit up in bed and listen. A chuckle, then the scrape of a chair, then silence again. It might have come from the dining room, or Mrs. Alders, or the new tenants, though you can't quite imagine him laughing. Either way, it's rare enough to make you pause. Your room is still cold, the same cracked basin, the same stiff towel, the same shirt from Monday now reworn with strategic brushing. But somehow, the morning feels different. Not warmer, not lighter, just softer. You dress and descend to breakfast. The room is half full. Mr. Hargood is absent. Mrs. Gillyflower is singing under her breath as she stirs something in a pan, badly and off-key, but singing nonetheless. You take your seat. Mrs. Alder enters behind you. She sits across the table without a word, but she places something beside your cup, a paper packet wrapped in butcher's parchment. You glance at it, then at her. She doesn't meet your eyes, only says, "From the grocer, day old but still sweet." You open it carefully. Inside, 2 currant buns, lightly squashed but fragrant with cinnamon. You don't speak. You don't need to. You split one in half and place it on her saucer. She says nothing either. This too is conversation. As the room fills, voices rise. Not loud, but more animated than usual. The new tenant actually speaks, asking for jam of all things. Someone obliges. Mr. Olver recounts a misprint from the press, a headline that accidentally congratulated a man on his own funeral. For a moment, even Mrs. Gillyflower chuckles. The city may not have changed, but something inside this little room has. You walk to work with a strange sensation of not being alone. The street feels familiar now in a way it didn't a week ago. You nod to the lamplighter still finishing his route. The blind accordionist isn't out yet, but his usual corner is already warmed by the steam vent beneath. The shopkeeper you pass every morning actually nods this time, and you nod back. In the office, everything is just as it was. The same desks, the same ink pots, the same crack in the east window. But the silence isn't quite so heavy today. Someone hums, out of tune, but boldly. Hargrave is already seated, sleeves rolled, which means he slept badly. But he offers a grunt of acknowledgement as you pass, a higher courtesy than usual. You begin your work, numbers again, coal shipments, ledger entries, the same familiar strokes. But your hands don't ache this morning. At midday, a clerk from another department passes your desk and taps twice. Just 2 fingers on the wood. You look up. "Good work on the Lancashire books," he says quietly. You blink. "I didn't know they noticed." He doesn't stay for more, just keeps walking. But the words hang there like steam from a fresh teacup. They noticed. You work a little straighter after that. Your handwriting is sharper, your columns neater. You blot more carefully, as if someone might inspect the page and find it worthy. Around 2 o'clock a new stack arrives. Instead of groaning, you reach for your pen without hesitation. There's power in being useful. By late afternoon, the light outside turns the colour of pewter, muted, cold, and thick with soot. You look up from your desk and catch a glimpse of it through the streaked window pane. Fog pressing in again. The kind that steals depth from everything, turns rooftops into silhouettes and gas lamps into smudges. But inside, the office is unusually quiet in the best possible way. Not stiff, not frozen, just settled. No shouting from upstairs. No surprise inspections. Even Hargrave has fallen into something close to rhythm. He leafs through a shipment ledger while sipping tea that's surely gone cold by now. You finish your column, stand to stretch, and, on instinct, check the blotting paper beneath your hand. Not a single smear. It's the kind of page you'd let someone else see. Neat, balanced, complete. You sit back down and glance sideways. Across the room, someone has left a small stack of foolscap neatly tied with string. It's marked for transport. You notice the handwriting. Tight loops, clean corners, the same as the note with the theatre stubs. For a second your fingers twitch, as if to reach out, but you don't. You watch instead. Whoever wrote that note is in this room. Not some ghost or dream, but flesh and breath and coat and collar. That alone is enough, for now. The rest of the afternoon drifts by in familiar motions. Pens scratch. Chairs creak. A whisper of coal smoke curls in through the window frame. Outside, footsteps echo in the alley like a soft drum beat. You work until the light fades too far, until you can barely see your page. Then you cap your pen, stack your papers, and stand. As you gather your coat, Hargrave speaks. Not loudly, just enough. "You're steady," he says. "That's something." You blink, then nod. It's the first compliment he's offered since you started here, and it feels real. Not flattery, not obligation, just an observation with weight. You step out into the evening. The fog is so thick it muffles your boots. The gas lamps glow like small tired suns. You walk slower than usual, coat collar turned up, face toward the damp wind. It's in this twilight that men like you often vanish, into pubs, into alleys, into factories and flop houses, but not tonight. Tonight you turn left at the fruit stall. You don't know why, but your feet carry you to a familiar side street. There's a small second-hand shop there. Books, oddments, pins, pipes, battered clocks. You've passed it dozens of times but never entered. Tonight you do. Inside it smells of dry paper and old glue. A man behind the counter glances up, nods, then returns to whatever book he's pretending to read. You wander. Your fingers trail over spines and wood and brass. You pick up a hairbrush missing half its bristles, a cup with a chip shaped like a crescent moon, a locket that won't open, and then you find it, a hand mirror, oval, with a tarnished silver back and a crack running through the glass like a lightning bolt. You stare into it and see yourself, not sharp, not whole, but there. You buy it. You don't know why. You wrap it in your scarf and carry it home like something fragile. Back in your room, you place it on the washstand, just so. It's flawed, worn, but it reflects light, and that's enough. The mirror sits quietly on your washstand, catching the soft flicker of your lamp, as if it's trying to decide whether to keep the light or send it back. You look into it again, briefly. The crack running through the glass splits your reflection in two. You smirk, not in humour, but in recognition. You felt like that for years. You wash your face slowly tonight, more carefully than usual. The towel is stiff but warm from being draped near the stove. You pat your skin dry, run a hand through your hair, and stare down at your fingers. Ink still lingers at the creases. It always does. You scrub again. Habit. More than hope. Outside, someone's whistling in the alley. Not a tune you recognise. Not even really a tune. Just a few uneven notes repeated too often. It fades after a while, replaced by the distant bark of a dog and the slow roll of a cart heading home late. You open your window an inch to let in some air. The fog is still thick, but not heavy. It curls around the window frame like smoke, bringing with it a chill that sharpens your senses. On impulse, you pull out your journal and open to a fresh page. You don't know what you're going to write. Then, with the same unthinking ease as breathing, your hand begins to move. Tonight, I do not feel lonely. I am alone, yes, but not hollow. Something held, something quiet, something true. A nod from a stranger, a returned note, a cracked mirror still reflecting. You stop there. It's enough. You close the journal, place it beside your pillow and sit down at your desk. The tin box is there. You open it without hesitation. Inside, the ticket stubs, the chestnut paper, the corner of that first note. And now you add something new. You fold a scrap of paper in half and write 2 words, "Not forgotten." You don't sign it. You don't need to. The box closes with a soft click. Your room is still dim, still cool, but not empty. There's a weight to it now, a comfort. As if it's learned the shape of you and chosen, finally, to settle around you instead of resisting. You pull the blanket around your shoulders and lean back in the chair. From the floor above you hear the slow tap of footsteps, someone pacing. 4 steps. Turn. 4 steps back. A man's ritual. You've done it yourself many nights, but not tonight. Tonight you stay still. You open your book again. Just a few pages. The vanished gentleman has turned himself in, by choice. The detective is baffled. The reader less so. You understand. Sometimes surrender is just another word for being ready to be seen. You put the book down gently. You undress slowly, fold your clothes neatly. There's pride in that, even when no one watches. Especially then. The mirror catches your eye once more as you lie in bed. Your reflection is gone in the dark. Only the crack remains. Thin, pale, honest. You stare at it until your eyes begin to sting, and then you sleep. The morning creeps in like a cat, quiet-footed, hesitant, almost apologetic. A faint blue glow bleeds through the curtains, casting long lines across the floorboards. You blink awake, unsure of what stirred you. No footsteps, no voices, just light and breath, and the faint creak of wood as the house shifts in its frame. You rise without groaning. Even your joints seem to have agreed to behave for once. Their stiffness, yes, but not the kind that grinds. The good kind. The kind that reminds you you've earned the stretch. You wash. You dress. The mirror greets you with that now familiar fracture. But today it feels almost deliberate, like the reflection is winking. In the hallway, the scent of toast lingers. Someone's up early. A first. You descend to find Mrs. Alder already seated, paper in hand. She's reading it out loud, barely above a whisper, lips moving like a prayer. You don't interrupt. Just sit, pour tea and pass her the sugar without asking. She nods without looking up. Another man enters. A new boarder? No, just someone who's usually silent. He mumbles a greeting. You mumble back. This is how a home forms, quietly. grain by grain. Breakfast passes uneventfully, which is a gift. You step out into the street with your scarf knotted tighter than usual. A gentle wind curls around the buildings like a cat chasing its tail. The newspaper boy on the corner tosses a copy too far, and it lands at your feet. You bend, retrieve it, and hand it back. He grins, a gappy, grateful smile, and says, "Cheers, Gov." You're Gov now, apparently. Progress. The streets feel like yours today. Not in a grand way. Not with ownership or arrogance. Just familiar. Known. The same way a worn path through grass becomes a kind of quiet claim. You pass a shop window and catch your reflection. Whole this time. The glass unbroken. The image clear. For a moment it startles you. You stop, straighten your collar, and examine your face as if you're meeting it for the first time. Not young, not old. Present. That's all. At work you take your usual place. Ink, paper, breath, and the soft metronome of pens across the room. But something is different. You don't brace for the day. You enter it. The day passes, not in a rush, not in dread, just forward. By late afternoon, a note arrives, folded, unsigned. You recognise the writing. 2 words. Thank you. You don't know what for, but you smile anyway. You tuck the note into your waistcoat pocket, feeling the crisp edge press against your chest, like proof. On your way home, the fog rolls in again, soft and low, curling around lampposts and boot heels. But it no longer feels like a threat, just another kind of hush. You take the long way back, not to delay the end of the day, but to enjoy it. When you reach the boarding house, a faint warmth meets you at the threshold. Not heat, but presence. You climb the stairs. The cracked mirror waits, and in it you see a man who has not changed the world, but has made peace with his corner of it. And perhaps tonight that is enough. The next morning the clatter begins earlier than usual. You're tying your boots when you hear it. Pots rattling in the kitchen, a door opening too sharply downstairs, followed by the unmistakable thump of a coal delivery. Mrs. Alder yells something unintelligible over the din, her voice slicing through the air like a cleaver. You grin. The house is awake, and so are you. The air is colder today. You can feel it through the floorboards, through your shirt sleeves, through the sigh of the window pane. Autumn has shifted into something crisper, hungrier, the kind of cold that nudges men toward wool and silence. You wrap a scarf twice, tug on your gloves, and step out into the street just as a chimney sweep brushes past. He's a boy, not more than 16, with soot on his lashes and a skip in his step. He whistles, even as the black dust clings to his collar. Not long ago you might have looked away. Today you nod, and he nods back. You walk faster than usual, not out of urgency, but because the morning feels sharp in that invigorating way, like biting into an apple before it's ripe. The city is louder, more alive. Horses snort, carts creak, boot heels echo, and someone on the corner is selling roasted chestnuts from a brazier that hisses with heat. You buy one without thinking. It burns your fingers and tongue in the best way. At the office, something unexpected greets you. A smile from Hargrave. A real one. Small, faint, but unmistakable. He points to a stack of shipping manifests. Your figures last week lined up perfectly. Not common, that. You offer a polite nod. Inside, though, something unknots. You hadn't realised how tightly you'd been holding your breath for weeks now, hoping to be seen, to be counted, even if only in ledgers. You settle into your desk, the familiar rhythm already humming through the room, pen to paper, page to stack, the machine of men ticking forward. But today, something shifts. You hear it. Not just the scratch of nibs or the cough of old lungs, but the breathing of the room itself, the way the whole space inhales when a delivery arrives. the way it exhales when the hour hand creeps past 1 o'clock and no one moves to lunch. You are part of this machine now, no longer foreign, no longer temporary. You realise something else too. This desk is yours, the ink stains, the dull-bladed knife, the corner where the wood is worn smooth by your own sleeve. You belong here. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it's real. At midday, Hargrave calls for you. You expect a reprimand. Instead, he asks you to come with him, downstairs, into the warehouse. You've never been inside. You follow him through a corridor that smells of mould and sawdust, past crates marked in smudged pencil and ropes that hang from ceiling beams like sleeping serpents. He opens a side door. Inside, rows of tall shelves, dim lanterns, and a chill that tastes of iron. He gestures to the left. There, that's where the real records live, old ones, shipments from 73, maybe earlier. We're checking discrepancies. Thought you could start logging them. You stare at the dusty ledgers. The ink is faded. The binding's cracked. This isn't punishment. It's trust. You roll up your sleeves and step forward. The first book is heavier than expected. It creaks when opened, as if protesting revival. The script is spidery and beautiful. And as you begin to copy it into a new ledger, you realise you're no longer just filling space, you're preserving it. The warehouse is quiet in a different way than the office, slower, denser. Sounds fall like bricks instead of paper, the creak of a rafter, the snap of twine, the distant thud of something too heavy being dropped too hard. But no one yells, no one curses. The workers here move with practiced care, like men inside a chapel built of crates and ledgers. You spend the rest of the afternoon bent over the old volumes, sleeves rolled up, hands smudged with ink and dust. Some ledgers are barely legible, written in faded brown script that curls like smoke. Others are filled with notes in the margins. Short 3 barrels, check invoice again, cargo water damaged, don't bill. These aren't just numbers. They're voices. You begin to hear them. The paper tells you things no one in the office ever mentioned. There was a flood once, a fire another year. One of the porters, Dobson, apparently vanished in 77 with an entire crate of cinnamon bark. The note about him is scratched angrily into the margins. Dobson never returned. You copy the line faithfully and smile. This isn't dull work. It's memory. You break only once, leaning back against a cold stone column, arms stiff. Your stomach growls, but you ignore it. In your lap is a record from the spring of 1872. For no reason you can explain, you find yourself pausing at a particular shipment. 2 crates of saffron bound for Liverpool marked "Handle with care. Value exceeds $40. Someone had underlined the line. You stare at it for longer than necessary. You picture the crate in your mind, the scent, the risk. Someone packed it with trembling hands, maybe. Someone else opened it and breathed in sunlight and spice. Suddenly the warehouse doesn't feel cold anymore. By day's end, you've filled half a fresh ledger. Hargrave returns, takes a cursory glance, and, without a word, leaves a fresh pencil on your table. Not a comment, not an order. A gesture. You leave late, long after the others. The street outside is cloaked in twilight. The fog's thinner tonight, sliding across the cobblestones like silk. Somewhere a gas lamp flares to life with a pop. You feel calm, not triumphant, just calm. You pass the chestnut vendor again, and this time buy 2. 1 for now, 1 for your coat pocket. You like the idea of finding it later when your hands are cold. At the boarding house, there's a letter tucked beneath your door. The handwriting is unfamiliar. You open it carefully. Inside, a sheet of thick cream paper folded with care. The message is short. To whoever returned my note, you were right. not forgotten. No signature, just a pressed violet tucked in the fold. You stare at it for a long while. Then slowly you take the tin box from your drawer, open the lid, place the flower inside. Doesn't matter who sent it, or why. What matters is that the world, even this grimy, grey, soot-streaked world, still surprises you, still nods in your direction now and then, as if to say, "You're here, I see you." You close the box, slide it beneath your bed, and for the first time in weeks, you sleep without dreaming. Because you no longer need to escape, you're already where you belong. The following week begins with a scrape of chairs and the clink of teaspoons against china. Breakfast is quieter now, not because people are silent, but because you are different. The loudness of the world has softened somehow, as if everything is wrapped in an extra layer of wool. At the boarding house table, Mr. Evans reads aloud from the newspaper again, something about a foreign crisis on the continent, but you only half listen. Your mind is still in the warehouse, surrounded by dusty ledgers and the strange serenity of being unseen and uninterrupted. Mrs. Alder scolds someone for leaving crumbs on the sideboard. You sip your tea slowly. It's not hot enough. It never is. But the rhythm of the morning feels more bearable now. You're starting to see it not as monotony, but ritual. Repetition as comfort. Repetition as proof that you're still here, still waking up, still returning to something. Outside, the fog is so dense it looks like breath, the kind that hangs in front of your mouth on winter mornings, ghost-like and brief. You cross the street to work with your scarf tight, gloves tugged and head lowered. Everything looks the same as yesterday, and yet you feel different. Like something inside you has shifted, subtly but permanently, the way a bone quietly knits after a fracture. The clerk room is dim when you arrive. No Hargrave yet. Just the sound of a few early risers rustling through their notes, warming their hands over the radiator pipe that runs beneath the front desk. You nod to them. They nod back. It's strange how these small gestures carry so much weight now. Before anyone else arrives, you take a quiet detour down to the warehouse again. No orders, just a pull. You want to see the ledgers again. There's something reassuring about them, about their fragility and permanence. How a smudged name or wrong digit can ripple forward through years of accounting or disappear entirely into the paper folds. You trace a faded name with your finger, M. Alcott. Not a name you recognise, no one you know. But somehow you wonder if he wondered the same things you do when he signed this page. Whether he mattered, whether he'd be remembered, whether anyone would read his numbers again in a different century. Then the warehouse door swings open, and Hargrave enters, holding 2 envelopes. He pauses when he sees you. "Didn't expect you down here." You straighten instinctively. "Just checking the record shelf, making sure things were in order." He nods once. "Good. I was hoping you'd take to this part of the work." He hands you one of the envelopes. Inside is a tightly folded assignment sheet. Temporary post, ledger verification clerk, dockside location, commencing Monday. You blink. "You're transferring me." He shakes his head. "No, loaning, for 3 weeks. They need someone fast with figures who doesn't mind damp floors and bad tea. I told them I had just the man." You hesitate. You liked the desk, the warmth, the pencil left beside your work. But you also like this, the movement, the unknown, the chance to be more than a shadow in the corner of a cramped room. "I'll go," you say, surprising even yourself with how quickly it comes out. Hargrave smiles. "Knew you would." You tuck the letter into your coat and return to your usual desk upstairs, passing the others now trickling in with sleepy eyes and frost on their boots. No one says much, but one nods to you, and you notice he's wearing the same kind of wool scarf you are. The kind from that stall 2 streets over, Little signs, quiet echoes. The city might be vast, but parts of it are starting to feel smaller, not in a limiting way, in a grounding way. You sharpen your pencil, you write today's date in the corner of a new ledger. You're ready to begin again. The dockside office is nothing like the clerk's room you've grown used to. It smells of brine, mildew, and tar. The windows are streaked with soot and seagull droppings. The floorboards slope gently to one side, as though the building itself is resigned to sinking into the river someday. You arrive with your satchel, your scarf still damp from the fog, and the quiet determination of a man who's finally found his footing, even if that footing now rests atop creaking floor planks and the occasional rat scurry beneath the stairs. The head clerk here, a man named Mr. Rennick, doesn't look up when you enter. He simply gestures to a stool by the window and mutters, "Ink's in the drawer, don't touch the top shelf," then goes back to his calculations, which he seems to be performing without moving his lips, but with the angry focus of a man attempting to solve a puzzle in a burning room. You sit. You start. The ledgers here are thick, water-damaged monsters. The pages have swelled and warped over time, and each one feels like lifting a slab of wet wool. The numbers are frantic, scribbled mid-transaction by dock clerks whose hands must have been half frozen. Half of them are in shorthand or code, peppered with slang you can barely decipher. But you recognise something. Underneath the chaos, it's still a story. Shipments received, goods dispatched, weights corrected, disputes noted in shaky red ink. 3 crates rum missing, one line reads. Then beneath it, in another hand, search the hold, Barlow drinks. You grin. Even here, amidst the clamour of dock traffic and the distant bark of stevedores unloading crates, the ledger tells its truths, if you're quiet enough to listen. At midday, you step outside for a breath of air and get nearly run over by a cart stacked high with barrels of whale oil. The carter shouts something rude, but you're too distracted by the sight of the river to care. The Thames glistens under a rare slit of sunlight. Dirty, yes, but powerful, always moving. You lean on the rail and watch as cranes lift tea chests, spices, and something marked India silk. Priority. You wonder where the crates will end up, whose table, whose shop window, whether any of those people will know that their goods passed through your hands, even just on paper. And then it hits you. You're not invisible anymore, not just a line in a ledger or a name on a boarding house list. You're part of the machine now, the immense grinding, coughing beast that is London. You don't control it. But you are inside it. A gear, maybe, or a hinge. Small, yes, but essential. Back inside, Rennick mutters. Good with dates, are you? You glance up. I try to be. Then double-check the import register from April. I think someone's shifted the port logs. You nod and get to work. You lose yourself again in the smell of salt and ink, in the thrill of finding order in chaos, in the strange pride of correcting an error made 3 years ago by a man you'll never meet. Evening comes, and Rennick grunts in approval as you hand him a clean summary sheet. You're faster than the last one. Where'd he go? Joined a circus. A pause. Not a joke. You blink. London never stops surprising you. You take the long way home, past the cranes, past the sleeping carts, through alleys where the air tastes of coal and the lamps hang crooked. You pass a bakery still warm from its ovens and buy a heel of bread without thinking. You walk and chew and smile, because you're becoming something rare in this city. You are becoming known. The mornings are colder now. The frost no longer melts by mid-morning, but lingers in gutters and clings to the railings like stubborn lace. You wake before the sun, not because you must, but because you want to. There's something about that hour, when the city hasn't quite stirred, that makes you feel like you're ahead of it all just slightly. You eat quickly, wrapping the remaining half-loaf in a handkerchief before stepping into the dark. The streets are silvered with frost. Your breath floats like chimney smoke, and your boots leave sharp, satisfying prints on the stone. The dockside office waits, as grim and damp as ever. But now it feels familiar. Yours, even. Rennick no longer ignores you. He grunts in approval when you enter, and on occasion he even slides the sugar bowl in your direction before you ask. That's the closest thing to affection you're likely to get from him, and frankly, it's enough. You dive into the ledgers like a diver into dark water. There's a rhythm now. Crack spine, flip page, scan left to right, right to left, then double-check the columns. Ship names blur into each other. The Pearl Queen, the Helena of Kent, Fortitude's Promise. You imagine their sails catching wind, their bows slicing through waves, and somewhere, far from here, the cargo you logged is being unpacked by hands just as calloused as yours. It's a strange kind of intimacy, this work. You never meet the sailors or the traders, but you feel their presence in every ink blot and every margin note. One entry simply says, "Barrel fell, smells odd." Another says, "Replace scales, rat bit." The entire world passes through these pages. Tea, salt, pepper, pig iron, strange woods with stranger names. Today, Rennick calls you over. Need your eyes on this. He points to a stack of receipts, bundled with twine and suspiciously damp. Old records. Some idiot thought the boiler room was a good place to store them. See what's salvageable. You carry the bundle back to your corner. The pages are curled, ink bleeding like watercolour. It's slow work. But you find something curious. A recurring name. Mr. Elijah Catterick, Special Manifest. It's stamped across multiple ledgers, sometimes circled, sometimes underlined. The cargo varies. Spices 1 month, opium another, then cloth. But the name keeps showing up. And always, the quantities seem off. Small discrepancies. Half a crate extra here, 2 barrels fewer there. Nothing obvious. But enough to raise your brow. You mention it to Rennick. He doesn't look up from his work. Catterick, yes, keeps reappearing. The math's strange. Rennick exhales slowly. He's got friends, important ones. Best not to poke too deep. You nod, but your fingers linger a moment longer on the paper. There are rules, yes, but there are also stories hidden beneath rules. That night after work, you don't go straight home. Instead, you walk north, past the quiet wharves and along the narrow streets that curl toward the city's heart. You stop outside a small building with a flickering gas lamp above the door. Public Records, East Archive branch. Inside, it's dry, warm, and smells like chalk and vellum. You speak to the desk clerk, an elderly woman with spectacles perched on the edge of her nose. "I'm looking into a shipping manifest," you say. Her eyes twinkle, not with suspicion, but something else. Recognition, perhaps. "First time?" she asks. You nod. She gestures you through, and for the first time you begin to pull at the thread. The archive is nothing like the docks. There are no shouting men, no creaking ropes, no cold wind whipping in through broken windows. Instead, the silence hums. It's warm and dry. The shelves tower like ancient trees, lined with boxes, scrolls, files, layer upon layer of London's secrets stacked floor to ceiling. The kind of place where memory lives longer than the men who made it. You're led to a reading table by a young clerk with hair like straw and fingers stained with the ink. He places a slim register in front of you, one of Catterick's. The ink is fresh compared to the rest. Someone's been here before you. You scan quickly. The names and numbers tumble past. Spices, silks, Chinese teas, a bar of medical tincture that smells suspiciously like rum. It's all above board, on paper. But then you spot it, A scribbled note in the margin, barely legible. Consignment duplicated in June manifest. Recheck tally. No initials, no date. Just a whisper in graphite. You check the June manifest, and there it is again. Same cargo, same quantities, different invoice numbers. Someone's been double counting, selling goods that never actually arrived. Or worse, diverting them entirely. You sit back and exhale. Your breath fogs the glass of your spectacles. Your fingers tap the edge of the table. This is bigger than a clerical error. You mark the pages, close the file, and walk back through the labyrinth of shelves. Your boots click on the tile like a metronome. You pass a portrait of Queen Victoria, staring out sternly, and can't help but mutter, "You'd be furious if you knew." Outside, the sky has turned a thick, soupy grey, the kind of cloud cover that feels permanent. You pull your scarf tighter and make for your rooming house, head down, heart pounding. That night, you barely sleep. Your eyes trace the ceiling, following cracks in the plaster like river tributaries. You keep seeing the name, Catterick, in your head, over and over. By morning, you've made a decision. You don't confront him directly. That would be idiotic. Men like Catterick don't argue, they erase. Instead, you start small. You begin slipping questions into conversation. You ask dock workers about missing crates. You double-check weights. You cross-reference ship's logs against customs records. And all the while, you make notes, quietly, carefully, a ledger of your own. You start using a system you learned from a former army clerk. A series of dots and lines in the margins that only you understand. A red mark for inconsistencies. A blue one for vanished goods. A small star for anything that smells like bribery. It's tedious, but thrilling. Rennick watches you one day as you work late, candle burning low. "You always this nosy?" he asks without malice. Only when the numbers start lying. He doesn't press further, just nods once. That's all the permission you need. Weeks pass. You gather pages, threads, whispered rumours. You track not just Catterick, but others too. Names like Lyle, Beecham, Harrow. Men who float above the docks, faceless and clean, never seen lifting a barrel, but growing rich just the same. You begin to understand the city not as a place, but a pattern. One that rewards silence and punishes truth. But still, you persist, one number at a time. And then, one day, your bundle of findings disappears from your drawer. No sign of break-in, no mess, just gone. Rennick notices your face when you see the empty space. "Take a walk," he says. "Not home, just walk." So you do. You head downriver, past the spice warehouses, past the tannery, past the fish markets with their stink of salt and sea rot. You walk until your breath smooths out, and your anger cools to a slow burn. You think about leaving it all, about forgetting the names, the dots, the lies, about going back to numbers that don't talk back. But then you see something. A boy, no older than 12, loading a crate twice his size. He strains, groans, nearly drops it. No one helps. You remember what it was like when you started. The cold, the silence, the invisibility. And you realise you don't get to quit. You don't get to vanish. Because now you know. And maybe, just maybe, that means you owe something to the next man who picks up a pen and dares to question what's written. By now the fog is part of your morning. It hugs your coat, clings to your cuffs, and curls into your collar like a persistent whisper. You step into the streets not as a newcomer, but as someone shaped by them, rubbed smooth by the same stones, hardened by the same air. You no longer ask where you're going, you simply move. The ledgers come easily now. You don't just copy, your hand adjusts for errors before they arrive. You anticipate shortages, flag overstatements, Recognise the smug fingerprints of those who think themselves cleverer than the ink they leave behind. You've become a quiet sentinel of the docks, and yet no one knows your name. The men in waistcoats pass you in hallways. The ship captains nod vaguely in your direction. Rennick still grunts instead of greeting. You exist like a corner beam in a warehouse, solid, useful, but unnoticed. But something's shifted. It begins one Thursday. You're summoned, not asked, but told, to report to the dockmaster's office, a place you've never stepped foot in. You glance at Rennick, but he doesn't look up, so you go. The stairs creak under your weight as you ascend. The hallway smells of varnish and coal smoke. At the end, a door, and behind it, a man with white whiskers and a gaze like tinned steel. He gestures to the seat across from him. You've been digging. You say nothing. He slides a sheet across the desk. It's one of yours, your dots, your red ink, your neat script. Your hands don't shake, but your lungs tighten. He doesn't accuse. He simply speaks. Impressive work. And stupid. You almost laugh. Almost. Do you think the city runs on honesty? He asks. Do you think the grain arrives on time because men follow rules? You answer quietly, I think it rots slower when someone's watching. That gives him pause. He leans back, taps a pipe against the edge of his chair. Finally he says, You've got two choices. Keep scribbling in ledgers or come upstairs. Learn the gears behind the cogs. You ask, And what would I be learning? He smiles without warmth. The art of seeing clearly and choosing when to speak. It's not a bribe, it's a door. And for the first time you hesitate. You leave without answering. You walk slowly, head low, boots echoing across polished wood. The air outside tastes of iron. That night you sit by your window. The city is a sea of lamps. You can't see the river, but you hear the gulls. Always the gulls. You pull out a fresh ledger. Not for the dockmaster, not for Rennick, for yourself. You begin writing. Not in code, not in red ink, not in dots and dashes, but in full sentences. You write about the man who paid a boy in biscuits instead of wages, about the barrel that fell because it was packed too quickly, about the bribes, the threats, the man who offered you a job without ever saying the word corruption. You write because the silence has weight now, and maybe, someday, someone will read it. Maybe not, but you'll keep the pages dry, ink sharp, names spelled correctly. You'll preserve the truth, even if it isn't safe, because the truth, once written, can wait longer than any man. The following weeks pass like footsteps down a long corridor, measured, echoing, deliberate. You keep your routine, ink, paper, silence. But something's different. You begin to listen harder to the conversations that used to wash past you like waves. You notice who flinches when certain names are said. You mark the patterns in the cargo sheets that no one else checks twice. Your eyes become trained not just on numbers, but on the invisible tug-of-war behind them. One morning, a name reappears, Beecham. You'd thought he'd vanished, folded into some comfortable exile after Catterick's operation started unravelling. But there it is, Beecham, listed on a consignment of lamp oil, routing through a warehouse you know was shuttered last month. You don't confront, you compile, a page here, a page there, until one night you return to your room and find the window latch undone. No sign of entry, nothing missing, just shifted. A scarf moved, a chair angled slightly off, the distinct smell of pipe smoke you don't own. You don't sleep that night. By morning, your notebook is hidden deep behind a floorboard. You carry only scraps now, codes etched into receipts, a folded invoice marked with a smudge. Your trust narrows, thins like old twine, and yet something else grows in its place. Resilience. You remember your first weeks, how afraid you were of missteps, of broken silence, of being dismissed. Now you know the risks, and you choose to walk among them. You start training the boy who sweeps the offices, Wilkin, quiet lad, clever fingers. You teach him how to tally with accuracy, how to hide a note in a cargo manifest, how to tell if someone's read a file and replaced it carefully. You don't say why, but he watches you the way you once watched Rennick. One fog-sodden evening, you and Rennick stand beneath the gas lamp outside the docks. He's got his coat collar up, breath clouding. You offer him a slip of paper with a new anomaly. 2 crates listed, only one ever delivered. He squints at it, then at you. You always chasing ghosts? You shrug. Ghostly footprints, he grunts, but he doesn't throw it away. Later that month, a man from the dockmaster's office is quietly reassigned to Aberdeen. No announcement, no scandal, just gone. Wilkin notices. So do you. And you begin to understand something else. You're not trying to clean the entire river. That's madness. But you can dam a few leaks, mark the quicksand, leave a rope behind for the next man. The city doesn't applaud you. It never will. But as winter sets in and the warehouse lanterns burn longer, you catch glimpses of change. A shipment accounted for to the exact nail. A supervisor who flinches when your name is mentioned. A boy who double-checks a wait without being asked. You lie in bed one night and think about the man you were, the one who stepped off the cart, knees shaking, boots too thin. And you realise something strange. You haven't just survived. You've become part of the walls. The kind of man who remembers the shape of every crate, the pitch of every lie, and the cost of every silence. And maybe, someday, when Wilkin sits where you sit now, he'll do the same. He'll watch, he'll listen, he'll write. Because Victorian London doesn't need heroes, it needs memory, and memory lives longest in ink. You made it, friend. All the way through the alleys and ledgers, the fog and the firelight, the crooked crates and the quiet codes. And maybe, just maybe, you came to see what life really looked like for a man who spent his days beneath the surface of Victorian London, where silence was safety and truth was heavy. Now, let the bustle fade. Let the clatter of hooves and the crack of crates settle into the distance. You can leave the cold, damp walls of the docks behind. Let the smell of coal smoke and wet rope drift away. Let the soft creak of ledger paper be the last sound in your ears. Your bed is warmer than that boarding room, your world gentler than the fog-drowned streets. Take a deep breath. Exhale slow. You've done enough for today. There's no ship to tally, no ledger to close, no secrets left to whisper. Just you and rest. Let your thoughts settle like dust on the shelves of that long-forgotten archive. Let your dreams wander where the ink still remembers,